And here we are, weeks upon weeks of gameplay, some big-time performances, but now it's all come down to our Final 8. Hello and welcome, I'm Rich Slayton, that's Andrew Guy, and this is the Royale Masters playoff weekend. 2 days of double elimination action and the Royale Masters dual format to crown one champion, taking home the biggest piece of our $10,000 prize pool.
I am so excited to be here, man. It's been over a month. It's actually been a year in the making. We did this last year. We did playoffs last year. It was super fun. And this year has been absolutely no different. The 8 players we have are stacked. The format is incredible. I cannot wait to see the pressure hit the player in those 4th and 5th. You guys have no idea what we're talking about. This is Royale Masters traditional. I'm going to talk to you guys about the format right now. It's been going on for over a month. We've had open qualifier after open qualifier after open qualifier. There's been 3 of them. And then last week we had our wild card open / last chance qualifier. And those were 2-day events that have gotten us all the way to where we are today. It was 2 days. And on the second day, we had players compete for the first place spot, but also for points. And those leaderboard points is really what it was all about to get all the way to today. And now, if you won one of our opens, you were most likely going to be in that top 8, but you still had to work for it. But now we're in playoffs, right? You gotta get rid of all of that. We're in double elimination now. It's been single elimination all the way through and best of 5s in our tournament, but here in playoffs it's double elimination, so you can get sent down to that elimination bracket, and every single elimination match is going to be a best of 5. That's right, best of 5 every single time someone's backup is against the wall, Rich. And like you said, this is in our Royale Masters dual format, which actually makes a best of 5 possible.
Yes, and that's a very different type of duels overall. For Royale Masters, let's compare that to standard duels. Regular duels, like you play in-game, like you see in CRL, if you play a deck in game number 1, it's gone for game 2. It's gone for game 3 if you get there, no matter win or lose. But in the Royale Masters duel format, it's just a little bit different. You only lose access to cards in a deck if you win with that deck. So in game number 1, if you win with, let's say, Royal Giant, Skeleton King, Mother Witch, well, those cards are not available to you for the rest of the match, BO3 or BO5. But if you lose with that deck, you can use those cards again. So that gives the player playing from behind just a little bit more opportunity to play catch-up, to actually be in the game and make a good comeback, which is really phenomenal, Andrew, in those best of 5s that we have in the lower side of our bracket.
Yeah, I mean, if you lose the first 2 games, obviously it's not a best of 3, so you're still in it. You really should be able to pick up those next 2 games because you have so much information on your opponent and you have all of your cards available. Now, of course, they navigated through our qualifiers, our wild card open, and here we are in our playoffs. They've still got to use the dual format if they want to get to that $10,000 prize pool. That's right, $10K on the line this weekend, and this is how it all stacks out. We've done $30,000, and when I say we, I mean Royale Masters. Rich, we're not putting any money in this. $30,000 that have been put up by Royale Masters. 10K here today. First place walks away with 5K. Second place walks away with half that. Third place still gets in the 4 digits at $1,000. After that, you know, it's still pretty good. 500, 400, 300, 200, 100. It's really about those first 3 spots. You want to be able to break $1,000. And of course, as we're getting ready for World Finals, we're going to see some of the biggest names in the game getting ready for those said World Finals, like in our opening match today, where we're going to be seeing the GOAT himself, Mohamed Light, going up against one of our lower ranked players in Venpers. I mean, it's hard to say lower ranked, Rich, because they're still here, but I guess in terms of their, professional accomplishments, it does feel like a bit of a David and Goliath match to start our day.
Yeah, for sure. A little difference there. Let's take a look at the bracket, and we can break down some of these matches, because as you said, we have a few heavy hitters, including 2 former world champions in this lineup and many CRO world finalists. And then on top of that, we're going to have a few players who you know from sort of the middle of the pack and maybe some smaller names in the mix. And here we go, taking a look at the breakdown. Opening match of the day. Well, I think you've heard of that guy before, the defending world champion. He wins all the golden tickets and gives them out like Willy Wonka. Mohamed Light up against Venpers, who we'll talk about more when we get into their match. Ta, who just came so close to World Finals, facing off against Akaza, the Expo player. Clown, aka Kickash, who also was just a couple of spots out of those top 7, up against Vitor. And then finally in Thrill, and another former world champion in Ruben, who will also be at World Finals. So we have some bangers here. We have some very close matches here. And most importantly, Andrew, we have double elimination, which if there's one player here who benefits the most from double elimination, I'm going to let you guess who that one is.
It's the guy that doesn't need any help. He doesn't need any benefit. He doesn't need any advantage. It's Mo Light, because we've seen him do it live at World Finals on a stage, right? With hundreds of people there, thousands, 100,000 of people watching online, and he's still able to play through those nerves. However, everyone else, if you run into Mo Light in that first round, it is really, really nice when you have one life to give to still be in the competition. You know, obviously with seeding, you're going to get our 8th place versus our 1st place, which is why we have our first match the way it is. But at least Venpers can come back and maybe upset some people in that lower bracket, or start his day off with a massive upset over Mohamed Light, which has happened here at Royal Masters before. And yeah, Rich, you talk about our CRL leaderboard, number 15, 16, and 17, Ta, Clown, and Inthrill in that order. So this is all heavy hitters. We're talking the best players in the entire world are here today. And yeah, I can't wait to get started. If you guys are wondering how you get involved in Royale Masters, well, you missed the boat this year. Now you just get to sit back like Rich and I, watch the matches, and tell us how much better you are in the YouTube or Twitch chat. But otherwise, go join along with everything Royale Masters so you guys can see all the great events that they're posting and hosting. And there's more this year, right? We're not done quite yet, but we got to do this World Finals, and then we got something for you guys in December. So, Rich, let's do it, man. We got 8 players in here. Obviously, Mo Light is the favorite. My biggest thing coming into today is I want to see how Ruben does, right? Ruben has been hot and cold all year. He was super hot in this competition. And then in that same day where I felt like we had seen Ruben really get back into fighting form, he kind of started making those mistakes that we saw right after he won World Finals. So, you know, one of the things we talked about during that day was he's got time. This is really what this is all about, is practice. Yes, he wants the money, but he needs to get ready for November. I want to see where Ruben is at today. I've got a lot of faith in him. Obviously been a fan for years. That is my #1 person to watch here on this Saturday.
Yeah, Ruben is going to be an interesting case here, because I think that we see moments where clearly the skills are still there. The question is the consistency still there, and that's going to be a big question he has to answer when he shows up at Helsinki. November 24th to 25th, by the way. Tickets still available. If you haven't gotten them yet, they are getting slim, the pickings there, so make sure you come and join us out there in Helsinki. I also want to take a really close look at Vitor today, who is a guy who's going to be who's now making his 4th World Finals appearance. He's I think that Vitor's stock is on the upswing at this portion of the year. He seems like he's peaking at the right time, so I'm curious to see how he comes out in this competition. And then you have a bunch of those guys who you talked about, that sort of like that chunk right in the middle: Clown, Inthrill, and Ta. 3 guys who barely missed World Finals this year, who all 3 of them I think should be early picks to be contenders to make World Finals next year. And I really want to see what kind of stuff they come out with here, especially Clown, aka Kickash, who in my opinion of those 3 players was across the Clash Royale universe, not just CRL, but much beyond CRL, was the guy who had the most impressive year of those 3.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it feels like he's maybe, like, if we gave out awards, the most improved player on the year when you look at what they did last year to this year. And I love that point that you make about Vitor, because, you know, a lot of players have issues with that. It's the same thing in sports, right? You always want to ramp up towards playoffs, and that's exactly what it does seem like Vitor is doing. He was really quiet, it felt like, in the beginning of the year, but he was still putting in the work, right? He was still going to the gym, still getting those leaderboard points. You still saw him, you know, on the top ladder regularly. But like you said, it feels like towards the end of the year, these last couple months, he's really, really become the guy that we expect to see at World Finals. So not World Finals yet, but this is the Royale Masters Finals. Venpers, top of your screen. Mohamed Light at the bottom.
Venpers has a little bit of competitive experience, multiple appearances in the ESL Snapdragon Pro Series in the North American region. Hasn't had any really big performances there, but of course has been key competing as well in things like the National Series, Supremacy League. So certainly we're talking about a solid, if you're putting him in the in the semi-pro category, a really solid B-tier semi-pro who could come up with a big upset today, but it would be a very difficult task.
Yeah, and he's got himself a interesting matchup here. It's not the worst. It looks like it's going to be, you know, the Remy Ellie deck with recruits, so a little different than with the Knight. And then at the bottom of your screen, it looks like it's E-Giant. It looks like E-Giant has started to come back into the fold just a little bit. And I could be wrong, but it could be E-Giant Rascals. Usually when you see those first 4 cards played, that's what it's been in the past. And Honestly, this matchup, I'm not 100% sure, because while the E-Giant does do damage on recruits, it's not a ton of damage. There's still a bomb tower in there to pull. So we'll see how Mo wants to play through this. We've seen him play through interesting matchups before, and I'm sure today will be no different.
Recruits are absolutely everywhere right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised to see the recruits coming out as the first 2 cards on the day. And Mo, ahead on Elixir, just goes ahead and wipes those off the board here. Vempers will have a response of some sort. And there we go. So first 2 minutes away. We're about to jump into double Elixir time. And so far, just some chip damage on the side of Vempers. Nothing really significant either direction.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You'd think you want to get a lot more damage here in single, and it's actually going to be Golem in single Elixir, just because, you know, you've got the faster cycle deck, you've got the wall breakers, you've got good chip with the bats and the spears and the miner. But I think Vempers actually did the correct thing and didn't get ahead of himself. Wasn't 100% sure what Mo was playing, and also, you know, that minor chip damage is going to be what he's really relying on as this game moves forward. So I like that he kind of paused and got ready for his first defense.
Best performance so far in his career for Vempers, a top 8 finish, an 8th place finish in one of our global tournaments. He'd love to add something better. I mean, already being top 8 at this competition might be his crowning achievement from an esports perspective. And right now, he's, though, in a lot of trouble as this Golem push has just decimated that left-hand tower.
Yeah, I mean, it was that NATO there kind of really crushed Vempers when you think about what the NATO can do to all the troops on the board for him, even the Rascals, right? The Royal Recruits, I mean, bringing them together, whether it's the Golem Pop or the Baby Dragon Belch, it's going to take those shields down, and then them going into the Golem, they're just sitting there, and the Baby Dragon's getting splash damage. I think the other thing that should have happened there is that, you know, when your opponent builds a Golem push, you need to create some opposite lane pressure, and while I think it was good that Vempers didn't go too crazy in single, even though he knew he was playing against Beatdown, I would have loved to see him turn up the heat just a little bit there once Mo dropped that Golem in the back. Could have been an Elixir management thing. He might not have been in the position to do it, but we see kind of what happens when you're playing this very fast cycle deck against a Golem deck and you don't create any pressure other direction.
Yeah, and you kind of have to get some damage early, right? And he got some very little chip damage early, but didn't create enough of a threat in either lane, and this is just going to be easy pickings for Mo to finish off.
Yeah, you know, I think we both felt that there should have been more damage done in single Elixir, and I don't know if that was more of... It could be that thing that Mo talks about, where people just don't play the game that they normally play when they're playing against him because of nerves. You know, whenever I've seen top-tier players play a beatdown deck with this deck, it's really all about that single Elixir damage rich, like you're mentioning, and then the dual lane pressure so that your opponent can't just build the massive push.
And you see, nice, easy win for Mohamed Light here in game number 1. And reminder, folks, this is a slightly different variation of duel mode. So Vempers still has access to all those cards, including the very, very powerful Royal Recruits, whereas Mohamed Light, no more NATO, no more Recruits, no more Bomber. So for those of you who are new to the Royale Masters duel format, that's the place we're living with. And now, hey, Recruits out, the NATO out. I think that there might be some opportunities here for Vempers to lean on either Miner or Hog, which are 2 of his most popular decks to play with.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Hog is not a bad idea, just with NATO being out. You know, Mo did a really good job, him and Jebez, which makes a lot of sense with the spells and the cards they picked in game number 1. You know, NATO, Lightning, Bar Barrel out. Really, the only thing I think you actually miss in this whole thing you mentioned, Rich, are the Recruits and the NATO. I think that's really it. Everything else can be kind of plugged and played pretty easily. It makes sense to go to Recruits in game number 1. They are the strongest evolution right now. You can see the matchup there. It is really heavily in favor of Mohamed Light with 6 of 8 cards matching. I do still believe that had this matchup been flipped, we would have seen a little bit more pressure in single and a lot more dual lane pressure. You know, maybe Vempers just feeling a little bit of nerves, but luckily for him, he's got game number 2, and if things go really badly, he's got that lower bracket match. And also, to let you guys know where we're going today, we have 6 of our best of 3s coming your way and 2 of our best of 5s, so we're going to be working through the first couple rounds and saying goodbye to our first 2 players here by the end of today. So just something to look forward to as we're getting ready for game number 2. And yeah, I mean, I guess if you lose game number 1, Rich, and your opponent no longer has NATO or Baby Dragon, you know, you don't have to run into Graveyard, because I really hate running into Splash Yard if I'm a Hog player.
Sure.
Mo still has all of his buildings at his disposal, which makes it like a little scary because I'm sure he's going to bust out one here in game number 2, no longer having that NATO. But after losing game 1, maybe you do lean on your comfort just a bit because he did seem a little uncomfortable. And there we go. Look at that.
Cameras,
Friends joining us on screen.
That's fun.
Big shout out to Tasty Bacon, who's doing a lot, wearing a lot of hats today here up in the booth, making Royale Masters work.
I don't hate Hoggy Q here, and Venpers has been playing. Yep, he's going to be playing the MK Prince Hoggy Q deck here, I believe, and Mo might be doing a similar thing the opposite direction.
Yeah, Mo has been playing a lot of MK Prince. He's made some videos on it. He's been playing a lot of ladder with it, trying different variations out, and you know, I think people are still not figuring out the meta, but figuring ways around the meta, and it's, you know, it's starting to shift it just a hair. We're not seeing as much Goblin Giant Sparky these days, but decks like this could be a reason why. Go ahead.
I would say this is a very smart play from Mohamed Light because Hoggy Q was probably, from Venper's deck pool, the best pick that he had, right? Because you're even talking about how it made sense that Mohamed Light might play a building in game number 2 because he doesn't have NATO anymore. And so Mohamed Light is essentially counterplaying against that Hoggy Q pick by playing a deck that could play against Hoggy Q without the use of a building here. And very specifically, Venpers has been playing this a lot. So Mohamed Light going, hey, I'm pretty sure I can beat you in the mirror match with this deck. And I'm pretty sure that this is actually might have been what they were going for, was this mirror match specifically.
I mean, it's a straight up snipe. Like, you look at even the way he puts that push together, he knows what's going to come down to get on top of that hog. He knows that the best responses are out of cycle, so he sends a Prince in behind the hog, gets on top of the Royal Ghost that comes down. Royal Ghost is distracted. Venpers has to spend even more. Now he's getting, you know, a little panicked, overspending on his defenses, loses his elixir advantage, and there's no real good way to get on top of the Firecracker and the bats. So just really a tough spot here for Venpers.
Bats will get taken care of. Prince to pick up the Ghost, and this is a really significant lead here. And what I don't see happening is Mohamed Light making a mistake that leaves him super thirsty here and way behind when it's time to defend against a Hog Rider. Right? You see him setting up this Mega Knight fight on the right-hand side. The miss of the fireball here. Wow. That's pretty significant. That's pretty huge.
Mo's laughing about it, which is, you know, good sign for him if you're a Mo fan, because he's not panicking. But yeah, that is not what you want, especially because that fireball is solely in the deck to deal with that evolved Firecracker.
Yeah, I mean, that really should be the difference maker, right? There's no really great way for Venpers to get to Evo Firecrackers. You know, he can try to arrows EQ, but there's no real phenomenal way for him to get to Evo Firecrackers without having to do that, without spending 6. Yeah. The Fireball should be the deciding factor here, but at the moment you're starting to see Venpers crawl back in, and part of that is the overspend that Mo had to make after missing the Fireball on the Evo.
Yeah, and that's a great job on Venpers to just kind of look at that mistake and just try to build something out of it. All of a sudden, this game becomes a lot closer. 1203 to 1686. Hog should still get a shot here, even with the Charged Prince and the Firecracker. So Mo doing a great job breaking through. Now down to 710.
And let's see, he's gonna maybe take one here. No, just because of the King Tower activation, does not connect. And now I think Venpers just knew it was over. GG, well played. Mohamed Light makes short work of his opening round opponent. 2-0, too easy. And he moves on to our next round.
You know, it's always fascinating when you see Mohamed Light make a mistake, because he makes them so few and far between. You know, his opponent did the exact correct thing and capitalized on him. Venpers, on the other side of it, he's human, right? He made a few mistakes. They weren't gigantic, but just a few small mistakes here and there. And Mo capitalizes on every single one of those. And that, I think, just kind of on a macro level breaks down the difference in these two matchups. Mo makes one glaring mistake. Venpers makes 2 or 3. They both capitalize off of each other's mistakes. And that just comes down to the fact that, like, Clash Royale at the highest level is about those consistent players that aren't doing things like that. Seeing Mo miss, he throws one fireball, he misses it. It's a surprising thing to happen, but still takes the game with ease.
And again, you see the big difference here is just that fireball and the earthquake, right? This is the version that Venpers has been playing, and it was kind of the most obvious pick. It was so obvious that I said, hey, I think I'll go Hog EQ here to go against the building. And Mo and most likely Jebas, if he's working this weekend, were like, yeah, that is what he's going to pick. So let's go ahead and go the same direction, change one card that means their Evo is dead in the water, and blow right through them. So very, very nicely done.
Which is
very
actually hilarious because that's the one card that he missed with.
Yes,
so it was actually like it didn't matter at all. But totally, you're right. It's the idea that it's there. Even the pause that it gives your opponent, right? Even if Mo misses that fireball, it's still the idea of like, well, it's still there. Now I need to really think about where I'm placing my firecracker. So if it's going to get fireballed off the board, I want to make sure I'm not giving other value on top of that, whether it's, the bats, the hog, or even the royal ghost. So really, really nicely drawn up by Mohamed Light in game number 1, and we move on, right? I mean, that's kind of what we expected to happen. I'm sure it's almost what Venpers expected to happen. So moving on through our bracket, hopefully for the players, it won't be as one-sided, but this is it. I mean, when you get to this level, you got to worry about that analyst. You got to worry about that coach. And that was a great call by you and by Jebas.
And we'll see if we get a look at the bracket here in a moment. But remember, Venpers is down but not out. Will be falling into our lower bracket, elimination bracket, which means he's playing BO5s for the rest of the day, right? That means you have to go a little deeper into your deck pool. You have more chances to come back, though, if you fall behind. So kind of an interesting challenge here for Venpers, who, again, this is one of his best performances overall in a competitive scene to make top 8 for this event. And I know he would love to have that be a little bit better than top 8. He'll have to wait to see who he faces in that first elimination match pretty soon, as we are preparing our second match of the day, which I'm trying. Let me go take a look and see if I have
the Kaza.
Ooh,
which should be a good one here, right? I mean, Todd definitely a bit more of the heavyweight hitter here in the Clash Royale world, but Akaza was no slouch when we saw them earlier this month. And then, of course, we have Clown, Vitor, Inthrill, and Ruben. But Mo Light moves on. Venpers moves to the bottom there. We'll revisit Venpers at the end of our day. So it's a lot of time to sit back and think about what you did and also watch, right? You need to be able to see what your opponent is playing here, how they're playing, and maybe what other decks are successful throughout the day, because how much experience does Venpers really have in best of fives? And, being predicted in your first match in game number 2 makes you kind of think again. He's got a long time to build some decks and maybe come at his best of 5 at a different angle.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that it was pretty easy to look. I had his Royale API up. And I said, hey, well, this is out. Well, based on the decks I look at, this is what he's probably playing. So he has some time to sit back and maybe try to think about some adjustments, think of some stuff that's maybe not on there. Get your mini out and maybe run a couple of decks that you aren't spamming on Royale API that are easy to track. He got red. And I don't know, that also talks about sort of the difficulty of especially going from game to game preparing when you're not working with somebody, right? You're trying to make that decision on your own, because sometimes it just takes another perspective, right? Hey, if you wrote a song, you wrote a poem, you painted a painting, you might think it's super cool, and then you have your friend go look at it, you're like, no, that's trash. You need to, this is very bad, but you have potential, so try something different. And just another set of eyes can be so helpful. So I don't know if Venpers has a second set of eyes, but maybe that's what he needs in that next elimination round.
Yeah, because on the other side of it, I mean, Mo has, light bulb and light switch and light car or whatever is his other minis. But you look at Mohamed Light on his battles, and the last 24 hours of battles have basically been that Royal Hogs, Archer Queen, EQ, Royal Delivery deck, right? That's what he's played in the last 24 hours, basically on his main account. And that's just, it's a small detail, but if we're going to talk about it, he didn't open with that, right? He didn't play it at all. And I'm wondering when, if at all, we'll see it today. I think we probably will if he's played it that much in the last 24 hours. But the fact that he doesn't bring it out in his first set, when that's what you see the first thing when you look at his profile, it's just something you got to pay attention to. It's just that extra little bit of homework that you have to put in because your opponent is going to do it. And, when we move forward to Ta and Akaza, that's also, I think, a very similar situation. Ta has a lot more competitive experience. He probably has someone working with him. And Akaza, being newer to the scene or newer to I'd say the highest level of the competitive scene, maybe he's solo. And we can see how much that really helps someone.
And this is interesting. I'm kind of looking at the various accounts of Akaza, aka Nexus, who's playing Ta in our next matchup. And same thing, right? He has two different main accounts he plays. He plays Nexus, which is the content creator account he typically uses, which in the last week or so has been just a ton of Hog triple spell, some Lava Loon, some minor, but mostly just a pile and pile and pile of Hog triple spell, Hog, Poison, Log, NATO. Whereas on his main here, on Akaza, we're seeing a lot of E-Giant Archer Queen, Splash Yard, and Giant Skelly Loon with Evolved Barbarians. So we'll see which direction Akaza chooses to go with here. But you do see that sort of split in workload from account to account. And so this would support either the Splash Yard play or the E-Giant play.
Yeah, and he's been playing a Knight Xe Inferno Dragon version of Graveyard, which seems good, right? Executioner is super powerful right now. Inferno Dragon is like not broken by any means, but it's just like a card that is still very strong and not paid a lot of attention to in terms of like counters being indexed. But I still think the Inferno Dragon is one of the best cards in the game that is underutilized and a little overlooked. Bowler going to be great to have against that drill, and you know, we talked about it in set 1 but didn't get it. Here we are in set number 2. E-Giant does seem to be back, and this E-Giant Bowler combo I've seen, and this is exactly why. You look at this, your NATO gets to do so much work with this deck, because you could just look at it as pulling units into your E-Giant, but if your Bowler is in tow, you've also got a massive lineup there, and that was just the first hit, and already such a huge advantage here to Ta, and a King Tower activation. Really, really nice minute and a half.
And this is both guys going very, very far off their easily trackable deck pool, right? Akaza not playing a lot of drill on any of his accounts, and this E-Giant Bowler deck not showing up much for Ta the other way. So both guys maybe taking a look at that first matchup and seeing what happened between Vempers and Mo and going, I need to be a little bit less predictable here. And so far, so good, but the advantage dramatically to Ta.
Yeah, and you know, I think that the nice spot that Ta's in is that not only is the King Tower active, not only did Bowler and Knight and Barbarrel do a good job, but that E-Giant at the bridge with how much damage he already has can be so brutal to deal with in terms of trying to get stuff across the bridge to help support that drill. The E-Giant can just set the line high and end that push right there. And
Ooh.
I mean, that is just... Ta's making this look too easy, Rich.
Well, the only real great way you have to shut down that Inferno Dragon is the E-Wiz. But I don't know if you know this, Andrew. Lightnings kill Electro Wizards, so it's kind of a huge problem when that comes in and just wipes that off the board. And this was just very well matched up for Ta to run right on through game number 1. And Akaza's gonna have to take a reset here and go back to the drawing board in game number 2 with 8 cards of information. And again, we talk about that. Inferno Dragon, E-Giant, Bowler, Lightning. Kind of leaves a lot available to Ta.
Yeah, and that was one of those games I feel like we've all had on ladder where you just come into the game, your opponent is not hyper aggressive, because I feel like people that are like insanely aggressive from the get-go, usually you can find a way to like find the balance and reset. But it feels like that was one where your opponent was pretty dang aggressive for a couple minutes and you never had a response. It felt like Ta could just place anything he wanted, wherever he wanted. I mean, he dropped everything on the board twice. That's it. And then his E-Giant 3 times. You know, he didn't even get through his deck 3 times, and he was able to just almost 3-crown that game. Everything worked well for Ta there, and it all started with just a very, very simple NATO with a Bowler and E-Giant, and how brutal that was to deal with for Akaza.
This is interesting, right? Thinking about Akaza from a deck pool standpoint going forward. Akaza still really likes the Archer Queen. She doesn't have a ton of spots in the meta right now, but he's been playing her a little bit in his E-Giant deck, and then also in an interesting minor control deck. I wonder if with Lightning out, if this, you know, this is one of those spots where, hey, maybe the Archer Queen mixed in with something else for a tanky style Evo might be the right move. Look, NATO's out and Lightning is out for your opponent. He has an Archer Queen, Barbs, minor deck, minor cycle control deck that he has been playing a bunch. That might be the right place to go to with Lightning and NATO both off the board.
Yeah, I mean, you even add E-Giant into that, right? E-Giant was kind of a great equalizer for the Archer Queen as well. You can NATO her in after she hits her ability or drop your E-Giant right at the bridge, get a great positive trade. So I don't hate that idea, Rich, but I do hate the fact that you thought of it, right? So
Sure.
that means that they shouldn't do it, right? Because you did the exact same thing in game 1. You were 100% correct, and Vempers got bodied in game number 2, or excuse me, match number 1, game number 2. So this is, again, if Rich and I are able to do this on broadcast in between games, that means your analyst needs to get you that one level deeper.
So wall breakers for Ta, probably going with some variation of minor wall breakers. Akaza going with the, according to the Clash Royale Twitter account, best feat in the entire game to open things up.
Oh man, that Evo to Archer's gameplay is something else.
It's going to be an interesting World Finals, tell you that much.
I mean, you talk about Magic Archer and Executioner being a problem. It's going to be very, very fascinating. Can't wait.
So a recruit party in the middle of the board as Akaza just kind of sits back and waits for his opponent to move. Arrows clear the wall breakers. And the Fish Boy will do enough work to mitigate most of that damage. First minute of gameplay away. And so far, it's been a slight lead. Looking like it might be 6 Loon here for Akaza.
He's got wall breakers down, and the top of your screen here, Akaza definitely trying to go a little unpredictable when you look at the Fish Boy and the recruits and the Skelly Drags, the Archers. It's a really nice Royale Masters duel deck. You got good dual lane pressure with the Skelly Drags and the Archers and the recruits. And, you know, the fact that you have control, not quite that much of a building, but you add Fish Boy and Lumberjack together, and it feels like it is almost as strong as a building.
And does take one bomb there from the wall breakers. So, and here we go. The bats come out a little bit in a funky moment. Bomb tower there, and he chooses to get the bats off the recruits for that left lane damage rather than to try to get that right hand through with the balloon, and it pays dividends.
Yeah, and I actually think that Ta did a decent job defending that. I mean, the bats being split, the snowball came out on the bats that were going to the recruits, so it was just a really, really nicely orchestrated push there from Akaza. Those Evo'd recruits do so much. They change so much about how you have to play the game in single elixir, and Ta just played the game kind of like the Evo'd recruits weren't as strong as they actually are. He needed to pause a little bit more. I think he needed to take a little bit less offensive push there before that big send came in from Akaza.
So first 3 minutes almost past, sudden death overtime on its way. We've seen Ta's plan for getting damage done, but with Snowball and arrows, what is his plan for stopping these continued pushes as time goes on? Because it does feel like there's going to be more opportunity to get some good Loon stuff in, and here we go. Lumberjack down, wall breakers to kite the Lumberjack back. Akaza should have Snowball ready, and he does. Does not get all the bats, though. Doesn't matter. GG, well played. Excellent deck choice here, as he just has to go ahead and cycle arrows to finish things off.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a tough one. You know, Ta, there's 2 versions of this deck that work. One of them has Knight, one of them has Recruits, and unfortunately with the Recruits version, there's not really a good way to keep up with the 6 Loon deck, right? Because when you look at what your options are to defend, you've got Poison, which is your least likely option, especially because when you're going up against recruits, you're going to be getting dual lane pressure. So that poison's always hard to pull the trigger on. And then the other thing is the bomb tower, the bats, and the spear goblins. Well, spear goblins and bats get taken out immediately, whatever order, with arrows and snowball, right? So then this comes back to the whole point of like wanting that Knight. Well, he used Knight in game number 1, but speeding up that cycle means you can get 2 bomb towers down. And that is just not something that Ta was able to do later on in the game. The cycle from his opponent being just 0.6 faster, but being able to use some of those cheaper cards to drop in the back and then drop your Loon at the bridge, it just made it so it was too hard for Ta to get, because you also have to have your own set of recruits down to defend their recruits. There's just so many layers of this that Ta knew. And if you looked at the numbers matchup wise, there wasn't really a way to play through it. That's a great deck pick in game number 2 from Akaza.
Yeah, really phenomenal. I mean, he got the read was great, right? We know how popular this minor recruits Wallbreaker's Bats deck is. He came with 2 spells that really could make it so that the only options to defend in any meaningful way were going to be the poison and the bomb tower. And those 2 just weren't going to be enough with the ability to actually get to the bomb tower. So very, very nicely picked. And now we go into game number 3. And look, here's the interesting thing about this, though, is that now arrows being out, that means some openings here on the side of Ta. He could go Firecracker and something else that maybe requires a fireball or that requires little spell attention. So now he's kind of, with the arrows and snowball both out, suddenly bats are now even more viable than they were before. So this has kind of opened up some interesting routes for Ta, who to go kind of down this central meta route, or we can see what we saw him do in game number 1 and try to get unpredictable.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at the cards that are out. The Fish Boy's out as well. I mean, going with something beatdown with Lightning could be really good, just so you can take care of any building. You can go super defensive like Mo did in game number 1, just completely control the game, and then just get one big golem push in, have your Lightning ready to go, and your opponent shouldn't be able to deal with that if they only have... I mean, I guess if they have Inferno is maybe the best option, but even then, that seems like a pretty hard draw. Like, we haven't seen a lot of Inferno Tower played. So, and also I think Ta does a good job when he slows his game down just a little bit. Yes, he can play cycle decks, but I think, first of all, you're a little bit more experienced than Akaza. You've been in these pressure situations before. We saw how well game number 1 went. Yeah, it was a lot of matchup, but also it was just the way that Ta played. He clearly knew exactly what he needed to do when he needed to do it. Game number 2, the matchup was really, really tough, so it's hard to say that Todd didn't know how to play it because there wasn't really a good way to do it. I just want to see him slow down a bit. I don't want to see him go back to the exact same deck. Sure.
A little bit of a change would make sense. It's just one of those ones where you're trying to figure out with the openings that you have. So let's look at what Akaza played, right? You're not worried about Royal Giant because the Fisherman's out, right? So you're not concerned about having to fend against a Royal Giant. You're not worried really about Fireball bait too much with the Skeleton Dragons out. There might be something, you could see something with Mother Witch out there, but a lot of the popular Mother Witch decks also run Skeleton Dragons. So you're not super worried about about pigs now either. So you start thinking about, what does Akaza go to at this stage in the game? What does he actually like to run here? Well, we talked about this before. He likes E-Giant. He likes the Archer Queen a lot, and Lightning is still not available. He didn't play that earlier. He still has the NATO available, so he could go in a Splash Yard style direction. So I think that we're going to be very curious with the direction that Ta goes here, and a Zap I think is a really great call.
Yeah, I think it's a good call, and I also just I want someone to either run I mean, there's been so many times where I just feel like people should run Goblin Giant Sparky in these tournaments once a handful of things are out, especially the recruits being out. And Akaza here leaking a lot of Elixir with Barbs down on the board. And a Hog comes out really late. I was like, did he maybe repeat a card? But no. And it is Goblin Giant and it is Mini P.E.K.K.A. And I really am finally happy that someone ran Goblin Giant when recruits were out. That is a bad NATO. You've got the bar. You know that interaction, and that is just one of those desperation, I really hope that it will work this time. It's like when a lactose intolerant person eats ice cream. They're like, I hope I don't get sick this time. And this time, there's no way that NATO with the Barb in front is going to activate King Tower, and that's just a tough way to start the game.
Yeah, that was pretty rough, and we talk about this a lot. There's almost nothing worse than blowing a NATO and still taking that damage. Unbelievable. And, look, Akaza here going with the NATO for some control, going with this little Xe play. But this was going to be a hard matchup for him anyway against Goblin Giant Sparky with this deck, especially the Mini P.E.K.K.A. variation. And this is going to be now an insanely difficult uphill battle for him to stay in here.
I just love this pick. I mean, Knight's out, recruits are too expensive, and if recruits are out, and Skeleton Dragons are out, and these things that you need a big spell for that are played often, Like, the recruits are the great equalizer when it comes to Goblin Giant Sparky. It's just a good way to be able to create opposite lane pressure, and you can stop that push. The DPS is great. And if recruits are gone, this just becomes such a more enticing deck to play, and I'm very happy Ta went with it.
Great call there, Andrew, as Ta now is just kind of playing a very chill version of Clash Royale. He has to keep an eye out on this right-hand side. That's going to be a healthy, this would be a very healthy push on the right-hand lane with the Evo Knight in front, the Executioner. He might go opposite lane here with the Hog just to spread the opponent thin a little bit. Instead, he sets up one more time defensively to contend with these Evo Barbs and see if he can extend his life a little longer. Keep in mind, there is no big spell. And the NATO to the opposite lane here, but that means the mini P.E.K.K.A.'s right there. So you're spending 3 elixir just to send your Hog from one killer to the other killer.
And, you know, it's really interesting because that Evo'd Barbs play was so obvious from Ta that I actually really like your call of going opposite lane with the Hog. I mean, who knows what he would have gotten out of it, but it would have changed the pace, and it wouldn't have just given elixir away, which is why, you know, he goes Hog in the same lane, Barbs come down, and then he has to set up another Executioner in the back. And that is a really nice NATO. I mean, excuse me, Lightning. That was perfectly timed for that Sparky, and this Exy becomes a problem.
Look, here's the big factor from this point, right? Yes, you're down to 500 HP on both lanes, but your opponent doesn't have a big spell. Your opponent has this weird triple spell with arrows and rage and zap, but no big spell, right? So there's certainly a chance for you to battle back in here, and Akaza's doing a great job at giving himself the best possible opportunity to make that happen.
Yeah, just getting maybe a little too comfortable is Ta. I mean, there's not a really good reason to keep giving your opponent lightning value. He's made this gap so much smaller than it ever needed to be. Just don't cycle the Sparky. Just cycle, you know, the mini P.E.K.K.A. Cycle the Barbs, whatever it is behind the tower, because the worst thing that happens is they go opposite lane. Akaza goes opposite lane, and then you start having to deal with that opposite lane push. I don't know if I love Ta just spell cycling and Goblin Gianting at the bridge.
Is there a lightning to back up this Hog? There is a lightning for the Hog. Can the Hog get one?
Oh.
It cannot. The Evo Barb shut things down. Really nice use of the NATO there, though. 290 left-hand lane.
Great Ice Spirit, Rich. That Ice Spirit keeps the Executioner alive. The mini P.E.K.K.A. should line up.
Wow!
The Exy. That's gonna do it.
What a battle back from Akaza. Unbelievable. Brilliant performance, gave up way too much early on, settled down, locked down the board, and take a huge win here in round number 1.
Bro, that was crazy. That was crazy. I mean, I've never watched someone just be in cruise control while their car is on fire for that long. I mean, Ta was just riding this to the end. Like, he's like, sure, I'll arrows and zap cycle you out of this game. It's only 600 HP. Oh, fine, arrow zap rage cycle you out of this game. Why not Goblin Giant at the bridge? I mean, look, all these things you understand he's going for the finish, but you're still playing against someone that's in the top 8 at Royale Masters. You've got to still orchestrate pushes, and Akaza didn't even really have to do anything crazy. Couple good Ice Spirits here, one nice NATO there. And it's just, I mean, even his Hogs were sent regularly into Barbs or Sparkies. He didn't care. He realized that Ta was going to just start defending those Hog pushes with Sparky that was in lightning range of the tower. He got 3 lightnings off with that. I mean, I'm blown away, man.
Yeah, too much lightning value given. And by the time we got into triple elixir, Akaza Nexus realized, hey, I can support these pushes with lightning pretty consistently. Yeah. And suddenly you saw just little bits and pieces getting through, the Sparkies getting evaporated, and then that last push there, just enough to get the Hog on tower. Really great stuff. And that's a really excellent recognition of Akaza, of kind of changing the macro game as time went on. Recognizing, hey, my opponent has this weird triple spell that I called out earlier that really can't get you you can't spell cycle me out with any reasonable ability. So now it's just make sure you don't get one big connection that makes that spell cycle suddenly viable. Continue to play good defense in that lane and just chip away and find opportunities. And he shifted the meta game, he shifted the macro game nicely into his favor, and that's a really, really top tier first round win for Nexus.
Tasty Bacon, roll the tape, brother. Let's take a look here at the final 30 seconds of that game, or 30 seconds or so. 986 to 348. Cycled Rage on tower. Goblin Giant at the bridge. Cycled Zap on bomb tower. Well, you got to know your opponent is back to another bomb tower. They also have NATO. They have a lot of ways to keep that Goblin Giant at bay. Rich, right there, that's about as good as it can get. I mean, yes, you want the tower damage as well, but you hit 2 Evoed Barbs and the Sparky with your Lightning, you're getting tons of value. Then your opponent goes another Goblin Giant at the bridge. This is just not respecting who you're going up against. They're back to bomb tower anyway, and he's shown you that he is not scared to send in those Hog Riders without regard to whatever. You want a Barbs, you want a Sparky on top of it? No problem. I'm going to get the Lightning value. I'm just shocked we didn't see Ta cycle a Sparky in the back going the opposite direction. We have seen how much a Sparky by itself, especially in Triple Elixir, it never needs to be by itself when it actually crosses the bridge, how much the tension that pulls out of your opponent. Sparkying in the same lane and Barbs in the same lane is just crazy to me after the first 2 Lightnings.
Yeah, once it became kind of clear what the rhythm was, I was hoping for him to change tack with the Sparky a little bit as well. But I think he found himself worried that the Hog was going to outcycle at some point, because you have the Barbs, which will pretty much always be a good counter to the Hog. The hard part with the mini P.E.K.K.A. is I think he was scared of that tornado, where he goes, hey, if I play the mini P.E.K.K.A. in the actual Hog counter spot, I can't actually get those 2 shots because he'll NATO it away. He'll pull it up towards the bridge and deal with it there. I think he started getting concerned that a Hog shot was going to start sneaking through on every other cycle, and so he wanted to make sure that that Sparky was in the mix, but that Lightning was a huge X factor, and that's why, I mean, look, Hog Lightning is not very popular. This version, there was like maybe about 2-3 weeks ago where this version of Hog, Xe, NATO Lightning kind of popped up. People started playing with it, and some people are saying this is the new broken deck. And I don't know if I would go that far, but I would definitely say that we've seen the utility it can have in the right situation, especially in a matchup like this one.
Yeah, and I think that goes to show everyone watching at home, like even at the highest level, those mid-game adjustments are everything. I mean, this was a huge come-from-behind win, and as Rich just said, a macro understanding of the matchup. All Ta needs to do, at least in my opinion, is just cycle those Sparkies in the opposite lane. That's it. I think that just changes the momentum. That changes the rhythm, as you said. Great use of the word rhythm, because that's exactly what it was. We've all been in that rhythm before, where you're just caught in the same cycle, and every single time you take a few hundred damage, you got to disrupt that rhythm somehow. And what Ta was doing just wasn't working. He was thinking too much, I think, about all the things wrong that could happen, instead of just like the one thing that he could change to maybe make things go right. And that's just pulling Elixir out of your opponent or not giving that Lightning value. So, you know, great game by Akaza. Don't want to take anything away from him. And we move on, you know, and we're on to our 3rd match here in our 1st round. And this is a huge one, man. I mean, this feels like about as good as it can get in terms of our 1st round matchups with Clown, Kick-Ash versus Vitor, right? I mean, these are 2 guys that are both in their full fighting form.
And you could almost say, I mean, Vitor is one of the people, he did end up winning a golden ticket in the end, so it kind of ended up changing the story a little bit, but Vitor and Kick-Ash were kind of competing for those same spots on the points leaderboard for a lot of the year. They were right in that just outside of the top. Kick-Ash, Clown held one of those top 7 spots near the bottom side of that for a while for the year. So these are 2 guys who were kind of neck and neck for a lot of the time this year. And again, I think that Clown, I think that Kick-Ash really, there's a short list of people who I think really deserved a chance at World Final this year who didn't get it, and I can count them on one hand. And he might be at the top of that list. He's definitely way up there on that list. And considering the year he had, look, what he did in the Queso Cup, what he did in GKR. People who don't follow Clash Royale, I know a lot of you who are watching right now are coming here from inside the Clash Royale app, might not follow the overall grassroots esports scene throughout the year a lot. Clown was taking wins off Mohamed Light this year in a lot of head-to-head play. He was taking wins off of top players on the planet and did enough to be just 1 spot out of World Finals. So I am really excited to see him in this one, and like I've said earlier today, I'm excited to see him, I hope to see him continue next year in the same form.
Yeah, and you know, with the people that he has kind of guiding his way, the team that he's working with Mo and with Jebas and stuff, it feels like he's just in the right place, right? He's exactly where he needs to be, because if you look at what, you know, Jebas is by far and away the best coach in the game, at least in my opinion, and then you look at Mohamed Light and his work ethic, right? Obviously his skill is unrivaled, at least right now, but his work ethic is really, really impressive. So if you have someone like Clown and Kickash who has the skill, clearly he has the skill. If he has people like that ahead of him and he's playing this well right now, even though he knows he's not going to World Finals, I think 2024 is going to be a big year for him. Vitor, on the other side of it, he has not had the same 2023 at all. Like we mentioned at the top of the show, it's been much more of a ramping up. But is that the whole thing with experience, right? I mean, you talk about those. I mean, I always go back to the NBA because the season feels kind of similar in the sense of like, as you're working through and as you get closer to that World Finals time is when you really got to turn on the gas. And it feels like Vitor has done just that. I just want to see how he does today against someone that is as good as Clown, because I think that's kind of a big, not only a test, but kind of an indicator. We're only a month away from World Finals, and I want to see if Vitor can take down someone as good as Clown in a great format.
I think that, you know, you're kind of hitting the right spot there with Vitor peaking at the right time of the year. The big question, of course, is do you maintain that peak through this fairly significant break from the end of CRL's season in September all the way to the end of November? You know, there's a lot of time in there to either let your skills slide or to improve or to try to maintain, to get burnt out. You know, I surmise that a lot of players were kind of taking a significant portion of October off or light just so that they could prepare for the full ramp up in November. Vitor's a guy who, people forget about this one. You know, we talked a lot about CRL where you had the 7 golden tickets, and then we separated the 7-point leaderboard, the 7-player leaderboard from that, right? Because the golden ticket players didn't factor into that leaderboard for World Finals, but they were technically all part of 1 point's leaderboard. Vitor ended up 5th overall in accumulated points throughout the entire year for CRL. That's a really significant place for him to end this year. I mean, you talk about that list of those top 5 for CRL overall on points this year. And of course, number one's Mohamed Light, but it's Mo, Mugi, Samuel, Pedro, then Vitor. That's the company he's in right now. So just a tremendous year for him. And then, you know, a few spots back behind him, just out of World Finals, his opponent, Clown, who, like I said, I'm really excited to see what he keeps on doing.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see Lava out here in game number 1 from Clown. And it looks like, did I lose?
Nope, I think we had a little bit. No. That was not your end. I saw it.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh no.
Folks, as you guys may have noted, we're not in a big production studio. Andrew and I are both in separate homes, and the production itself is in a different place entirely. So, just the joys of remote production with their occasional hiccups.
Yeah, and talking about occasional hiccups, I mean, I think Clown must have just really misread that RG at the bridge. He thinks he's going for a tower trade situation. Instead, just lets that Inferno get on top of his Princess. And now Vitor has a full tank of gas to defend against. And yeah, I mean, when you're trying to go for not even prediction fireballs and single elixir, yes, you're going to get some damage here, but I don't know. That's a tough spot for Clown to be in early.
Yeah, this is did not go the way he certainly would have hoped, and that bird will get out there and stop the bleeding, but that's about all Clown can do here at this point, is continue to try to stop the bleeding.
Yeah, and going to drop this Royal Giant into an ocean of barbs. Nice E-Spirit plus Fireball. Needed to get back around, I think, to Fireball, so cycles the E-Spirit first, and now this is about Vitor. Does he go on the offensive? And absolutely he does.
Yeah, smart play here. It's going to be really hard for Clown to stop this with any significant results. He's going to take a couple shots here from the Loon.
Yeah.
And even if he does...
Wow.
Nope. Yep. Nope. Nope. All right, well, let's get ready for game number 2, folks. That was the end of that.
Yeah, I mean, a very odd start here. And I got it pulled up on my other monitor so I can kind of check and see, like, just exactly where that went awry for Vitor. I mean, for Clown.
Yeah, I think that one of those interesting things about Royal Giant right now is that you still feel like you want to run Royal Giant in some of these matchups, but people don't want to run the Royal Giant Evo. And I don't know. I mean, I guess obviously it depends on what matchup you're thinking. There could be tons of different matchup situations that would be more beneficial for Clown here than the one that he found himself in. But I'm not 1,000% convinced right now, especially in game number 1, about running Royal Giant overall at this stage in the game. And definitely the Royal Giant Evo is in maybe the weirdest spot, having gone from a must play to a card to you pass it over for one of these other kind of tank spot Evos.
Yeah. I mean, it is really interesting. You know, you look at both those cards in the deck. Obviously, both can be evoed, and, you know, the recruits didn't do much here. I mean, that was just, I think, the fact that the Vitor had those minions. Vitor being able to defend with minions and Phoenix was such a cheaper response that he was able to continue that push on the right-hand side with the Inferno, Bomber, and Barb Barrel, because Clown did drop Skellies. I think the Skellies missed anyway to distract the Inferno Dragon, but there was still a Bomber there regardless. So the Bomber would have cleaned up the Skellies, the same result would have happened. And I think that's just because, you know, I think if you're Clown, you don't expect those minions to be in there. Maybe bats, maybe something like that. I mean, minions is the perfect card, so you're hoping your E-Spirit can do just a little bit more than it did. But Phoenix minions come out, they take down the RG for cheap. You take a couple shots, you take a tower. That's a great trade for Vitor. He'll take that 10 times out of 10.
So now we start thinking about, where does this Clown go from here, right? No more arrows, no more snowball to face. So that does give him some options. He does still have to contend with Tornado in this game. He has a minor MK Wall Breakers deck with Archer Queen, which he's obviously not running now that Tombstone is out. So let's go ahead and change tacks entirely.
Yeah, it looks like he might be going to Graveyard and hoping for him. I mean, that's not 100% Graveyard when you see the Tombstone and Baby Dragon now. It's, you know, we've seen it coupled with other beatdown combinations as well, but if it is Graveyard and Vitor's first 3 cards, are Recruits and Mother Witch, that's not what you want to see.
It's looking like it might be E-Giant instead here.
Yeah.
Happy with the bowler.
Much better situation.
Although he's probably running Lightning here, which obviously not as nice against the Recruits. And what is Vitor and Jeba's cooking over here with the Mother Witch in this one? Yeah, maybe thinking that bats might come out because of the arrows and snowball both being gone.
What has Clown been even playing lately that would? I mean, Clown does love to play the Remieli decks, so Mother Witch would have gotten a lot of value there. But as of right now, Vitor in pretty firm control of this game. We'll see how controlling that E-Giant becomes a factor later on, especially because all the troops to get damage in are going to get zapped. But luckily for Vitor, you know, if you have Recruits and Goblin Gang down, they're going to do enough damage on that E-Giant before it gets to your tower. But then you have to think about the bowler behind and that NATO lineup. So I think Vitor's got his work cut out for him here in game number 2.
Almost certainly, and as time goes on, it's going to be interesting to see how he breaks through now that we're getting into double and beyond into triple. And how does he take down these E-Giants with all this splash? And interesting, Clown's just going to E-Giant direct. It's a defensive E-Giant. Just use that to chunk all that down and instead make this left-hand lane into his real push.
I actually really love that call. Vitor not going to use the ability there, even though he has stacked souls. Too busy defending here on the left-hand side. And yeah, that's a great call. I mean, just going dual lane pressure, not doing what you think what your opponent expects you to do, which is kind of just pile it all in behind that E-Giant, using the E-Giant as a defensive card. One of the best defensive cards in the game. And now he decides, with that cleanup and with those wall breakers in, he's sacrificed enough tower damage to get a real push in here. And that is a very healthy E-Giant on the tower.
I was going to say, that got in deep and is just hanging out.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of work done, and this bowler is still here, completely healthy, ready to play some defense. So, phenomenal sequence. And this deck has suddenly risen a lot in popularity. It has 2,000 plays overall in the last 7 days with a 61% clip.
You know, it deals so well against all the things that are working in the meta, just not E-Giant. If you're running into Goblin Giant Sparky, no problem. You're running into Graveyard, no problem. You're running into Wall Breaker spam, you've got dual lane pressure, you've got dual lane presence. Like, this deck makes sense why it's here, but this is not the matchup that Vitor wanted. And I like what Clown's doing. He needs to do exactly what he did before, which is just defend, 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 find an opening with a good counter push, and then do exactly what we're seeing. And Vitor knows it. There's no way that he can defend that with a NATO and E-Giant and all those spammy troops. Great, great deck pick in game number 2.
Yeah, Clown battling back really, really nicely and going super splashy. And, you know, you look at game number 1 in this matchup, where Vitor pretty much played nothing swarmy at all, right? He went lava, so he had the barbs, but recruits were still open for Vitor, and then a lot of the other kind of swarm cards as we saw in the Goblin Gang. So Clown makes a really good read here in game number 2, goes, hey, you've got recruits still open, which you're almost definitely going to play in the first 2 games, and of course, a bunch of other swarmy stuff available, so just splashes it up, throws the big purple guy on the board, and takes control. Now the question is, this deck from Vitor is really solid, was really good, and just ran into one of the worst possible situations. Does he go with something like this again? And if so, does Clown go with something that has Bomb Tower just to hedge against this and the very likely recruits here in game number 3?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, that deck from Clown having so much splash, and then people forget that Tombstone actually is relatively formidable against the recruits because of the Skellies spawning, and then even when it pops, those Skellies are soaking up that charge. Everything in his deck other than the Knight did splash damage. It really felt like there. So yeah, really, really great call. I mean, you obviously can't run into the exact same situation again. I don't mind that call, Rich. I don't actually think going to the same deck for Vitor is that bad, because even if you have that bomb tower to deal with, you have the ability to get over the middle with the skeleton dragons. Then you start creating the conversation about fireball bait. Then that Mother Witch is, well, do you pull the trigger on the Mother Witch or the Skelly Drags? Then that dual lane pressure comes in. I mean, we could even see him take it one further and go to the other dual lane deck, take out Mother Witch, put in Dark Goblin. You know, I can't remember exactly what the makeup is, but it's very spammy, and it also has that bait aspect to it. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, no big spells other than lightning are out for Clown. So that's the other part of this conversation where, you know, poison and fireballs are going to get a lot of value if Vitor just leans into that. So, you know, Vitor's, again, got himself his work cut out for him. This E-Giant deck, it makes so much sense with where the meta's at to why this would be so good, because it does cover recruits and Goblin Giant Sparky so well, and that wall breaker push. I feel like we're going to see a lot more of this deck over the next day or two.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think that both these players, I'd be surprised to see Firecracker get in the mix just with the likelihood of both these players running Fireball, unless someone's really trying to find, like as you said, create multiple targets for that Fireball as well. Man, this is why the analysts make their chunk of the money from these players, is running the multitude of scenarios and understanding their opponent's deck pools. But Lightning out, NATO out, Bowler out. I mean, some sort of mortar bait might actually work nicely here as well out of Vitor. I know that Clown's been running lots of mortar bait with skeleton dragons. I wouldn't hate that out of Vitor here as an option. I don't think Clown goes that direction just because of what his opponent has left, but it would be an interesting direction for Vitor to go in this one.
Yeah, and then for Clown, honestly, I wouldn't even mind if he went back to the deck that he's been playing a ton and with that minor wall breakers deck, just because, you know, the arrows and snowball being out for Vitor, it's actually a pretty big deal. Like, running into both of those again would be really, really tough. Yes, there's always log, but you know, not a big problem there. So looks like Clown's gonna go with Bomber, Vitor's gonna go with Spears. So Vitor already leaning towards, you know, quick cycle, spammy bats, wall breakers, minor. Usually that's what it is with Spears.
And Clown here might be going to Golem. We already ran E-Giant.
Ends up taking one wall breaker shot there on the left-hand side, and Lava
goes
comes out in front.
There you go. Well, we saw Lava work one way today. Let's see if it can work the opposite direction. Poison's going to die a little early for these pups, and I don't know if Clown is running something. He might have arrows in here. Decides not to throw anything after those spears, and instead just goes for the reset after taking the slight lead.
Yeah, and I like the Vitor defense with bats there, baits out arrows. Now he's learning more about his opponent. Instead of getting the building down, now his opponent has to kind of pause before he goes on offense again. And he's figured out what at least one of the spells are. And arrows out early on means that Vitor's going to have to be pretty smart with creating offense, baiting out a spell so that his bats or spear goblins can actually get value on defense. And I don't know. This is not a fun matchup to play by any means if you're Vitor.
No, this is going to be an interesting challenge. See how he works through this one. And does burn down the Evo Knight with the Inferno Dragon. No spell available, so Clown has to drop his Evolved Barbarians, which should be easily dealt with. Nice little pressure arrows here from Clown, though. I like that.
I do too. I mean, he only can get back around to the Knight after cycling a couple cards, and Vitor spent a lot more than he wants to. Now he has basically nothing on the board. He's going to support it with the Miner, but you still see, even with those Skeleton Dragons down, Clown still has an Elixir lead.
And he didn't quite have the Elixir to turn that into real pressure, but instead he'll just eat the damage and then lava up in the back corner of that lane. And he's taken a lot on that left-hand side as well. Keep an eye on both lanes being a possibility, but at the moment, getting ready to build up a very, very big lava push into that right-hand lane. Now Loon behind.
And there's the building finally. The bomb tower comes down. And Fireball goes to the support cards as opposed to the building. And this is a good exchange for Clown.
Does take the lead for the moment. Almost snuck the Loon all the way in there, and Clown's gonna have to just eat those wall breakers on the left. Cannot afford to eat the Evo Knight shots, so drops his barbs one more time.
And now Vitor just needs to have a nice clean defense here and then keep that pressure up on the left-hand side. Balloon does not get pulled, and that is devastating for Vitor. That's game. Bomb goes off. Now he can spell cycle his way out, and Clown with a very nice reverse sweep. And Rich, that's exactly the guy that you expect to see at World Finals next year, and right now he's just taking down a World Finalist.
I don't know if we can grab the replay from that ending, but you know, that's exactly what happens with balloons sometimes. You put together a good push and you just bump that balloon outside of building range, and that balloon just it wanted to go to that building for a second, but I think it was the Skeleton Dragons that bumped it just a little bit over to the right. And it's one of those most frustrating things when you're defending against balloon, especially in a lava loon situation. You're like, how far over to the side do I have to put my bomb tower to pull this freaking balloon? And
what's crazy is that he did, like, I mean, if you look at the replay, I mean, I don't know if we have it or not, but like that bomb tower looks like it's so close to the building. And yeah, those Skeleton Dragons, man, just doing you dirty, and you've got to feel just, I don't know, you just feel naked when you're building out and only support cards like the bats and the spears. And here we go, Rich. This is the final little bit, 1240 to 1172. This is where the dual lane pressure from Vitor looked really great. And Clown says, I think I just need to end this.
Yeah, and you're going to see him, the balloon comes in high here, and look at that, it's perfect. That's perfect Skeleton Dragon play. It gives a little extra nudge there. The bats are trying to push that balloon back to retarget towards the bomb tower, but that's really, really classic Lava Loon gameplay. You used to do that with bats a lot with Loon Cycle, right? With Minor Loon Cycle, that's a pretty classic play. If someone would play a balloon closer to the middle, you'd use that same bats push. Skeleton Dragon's even better, a big nudge to the outside, and you saw the attempt to recover from Vitor, just not quite enough. And so Clown will continue along in our upper bracket, but keep in mind, folks, this is, again, double elimination gameplay today. So Vitor not out, just in our lower bracket. We'll be playing BO5s. In fact, a BO5 later today to see if he stays alive. But overall, really just phenomenal play there by Clown. And I see someone saying Vitor's only mistake, but I don't even know if I would call that Vitor's mistake. Vitor's doing the thing he needed to do. Clown just got the perfect timing on that push outside. It's because here's the thing, right? If you play that bomb tower a little bit higher, then that bomb tower gets eaten up by the support troops faster, right? So it's just, you're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place, and Clown just took advantage with some really phenomenal gameplay.
And, you know, you have to remember how that push started is with the barbs coming across the bridge. So then you go, well, why don't you go closer to your princess tower, right? And I think it's just that Vitor was looking at all of his options. He goes, I need to figure out how to defend these Evoed barbs as cheaply as possible because I know it's coming right afterwards. So let's get this bomb tower in a safe spot to where it's going to preserve its health, take care of the barbs, and then still be alive long enough to distract the lava or balloon so I can actually figure out how I'm going to defend that. And Clown did just a great job of, he recognizes, all right, he put the bomb tower where he's supposed to. Now I need to make my balloon go where it's not supposed to go. Skeleton Dragons push, excellent gameplay. And, you know, yeah, like you said, Rich, I don't know if it's a mistake, but yeah, I mean, I think we knew from the beginning of that game that Vitor was going to in a really uphill battle with the arrows and the fireball. And I think he did a pretty good job. I don't think there's anything else you could have done at the end there. You drop the bomb tower where it's supposed to go. You maybe talk about opposite lane pressure, but there's no way to do that because I think your opponent just kind of ignores it and maybe takes another couple wall breaker shots. Yeah. Or just defends very, very cheaply and then sells out as Clown did. Just great stuff there.
Yeah, a very nice performance overall. I don't know if we have the bracket ready yet, but when we do, let's take a look and see where we are as we're getting very close to our first round of elimination play. We've gone through 3 of our first round matchups. We have 3 winners who are staying alive with that extra life to give in the upper bracket. And here, let's take a look. Oh, never mind. We're jumping right into gameplay. Ruben and Infernal.
Wow.
And I guess we're joining a half step late here as maybe the players started their game a bit before the admin's instructions. Either way, here we go.
We're 45 seconds in, and Ruben was able to, looks like he just took that tower with a Barb's Mini P.E.K.K.A. Dark Prince push, and Inthril on the other side of it going to, I mean, this is a deck that we saw that looked kind of fun to play a couple weeks ago, and apparently just did not have any way to defend that very well.
And I think this was the, I'm trying to remember which one is which. I know there's a funky one that Sweep has been playing a whole lot. Sweep's been kind of going through
I was going to say, this reminds me of that deck that we were casting that we both wanted to play with.
I played a bunch of games with it. It was fun.
Mm-hmm. Felt really satisfying to win with and incredibly frustrating to lose with.
Yes! That's a true thing to say out loud. And Mother Witch here will be disruptive a bit against these bats.
Yeah, Ruben with a great call here in game number 1. Doesn't even really need to play what probably is a Goblin Giant. And
he might play it up here, I was going to
say. Yeah, yep. Exactly. We both felt at the same time, great defensive pull there, and still going to get to tower.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep that Mother Witch defended a little bit longer, and ended up working out very nicely and has a decent elixir situation. 45 seconds left. I don't really see a phenomenal opportunity for Inthril to break through here. You know, he's going to want to try to get barbs. With the barbs and the mini P.E.K.K.A., these Goblin Giants are not long for the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way around it. I mean, you said exactly what it is the barbs and the mini P.E.K.K.A. I mean, shockingly, that Skeleton King did way more than I think he should have. Great timing there and placement from Inthril. But still, it's too little, it's too late. That Mother Witch is getting too much value. You're not going to Arrows Rage that Mother Witch right now. You need to get more elixir on the board in the form of troops. And our former world champion with an offline quick finish here in game number 1.
Yeah, that was kind of a hot knife through butter and very nicely done. And the combination of the barbs and the mini P.E.K.K.A., they just create so many defensive options for you in a deck that, you know, often when you're talking about some of these bigger beatdown decks, especially these Goblin Giant decks, which are deceptively heavy, you get concerned that the counter might get outcycled. Well, okay, great. Then have 2 counters. And that's what you see here. Mini P.E.K.K.A., barbs, both able to get some shutdown play here, and the arrows and rage just not able to create enough room. Not to mention the Fisherman kind of left as a man without a purpose in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, especially that Arrow's Rage point that you make. I mean, what are you going to do with those against the Mother Witch, who if you're in Thrill, your most frustrating cards to deal with are the Night Witch and the Skeleton King, and those both just give so much to that Mother Witch. You know, she becomes not only an incredibly annoying offensive card, but defensively, she's just able to stop everything behind the Goblin Giant push that would come in from Thrill. So that was just like really easy for Ruben. I mean, even in the beginning, I think maybe he just put Barbs in one lane and had a mini P.E.K.K.A behind once Thrill maybe cycled his Skeleton King early, and Ruben just went for a sellout push. I wonder though, I mean, obviously it's so hard to tell because you don't know what the cycle was for Thrill, but for that to work as well as it did, like, did Ruben get lucky? You know, sometimes we'll see him do those pushes where where he thinks he's got his opponent's number, and they'll end up defending for a lot cheaper. You know, if maybe Thrill had his Goblin Giant in hand, he could have kited those to the opposite lane. I'm not 100% sure, but whatever it was, Ruben saw blood in the water, went for the kill, was able to get away with it, and we'll see if he's as lucky in game number 2. I mean, Thrill is no slouch, but he really had trouble there in that first game.
Yeah, at a certainly large challenge here. And, you know, now you look at the other side of things. You see the Mother Witch and Fireball both out. This kind of gives opportunities for Thrill to go a little bit smaller, right? You're seeing some Splash out, too. You're seeing Fireball out. You're seeing, technically, Rage at this point now. The Dark Prince and the Mother Witch all out. That does seem to lend yourself to a lot of the sort of baity troops, right? A lot of the Goblin gangs are now more viable. Bats obviously get a little bit of a buff here. I don't think you're going to be seeing skeletons here, but a lot of different goblin-based troops suddenly get a lot more value here. I wouldn't be surprised if Ruben hedges against some of that swarmier stuff by going with some of the stuff we've seen today. We've seen a lot of Baby Dragon, a lot of Bowler today. I would not be surprised to see Ruben go in that direction here, just to hedge against those possibilities from Thrill.
And if I'm Thrill, I'm going to Graveyard. I know it's just so simple if Mother Witch is out, play Graveyard. The reason I'm doing that is because with the way Ruben has been playing lately, I think being a bit slower in Thrill, and this conversation doesn't matter anymore, but I was going to say I think going a little bit slower and being able to control the pace would be a good way to come back in game number 2 after how game number 1 went. Because right now, Ruben's just got all the momentum riding, and you know just as well as I do, man, running into Splash Yard is a really great way to stop that momentum, stop that confidence, and then your opponent has to buckle back down because it's such a defensive deck. That's not the case for maybe Thrill's just going with, okay, never mind, he's going with Ram Rider.
And Ruben going Hog, which, you know, that's a thing you expect.
Yeah, I know. I literally, when I saw that Firecracker cycled, you and I feel very similarly about Ruben and the decks that he runs, but at least he's doing it with a game in hand, you know, coming out of RG or Hog, so he can at least get sniped and then still have that game number 3. But yeah, I don't love it either. At least it's not the same version that we see every single day. You know, it's a little different with the Mighty Miner.
Sure.
And the Evo Firecracker.
He can try to get some of that 3-card cycle here, but he has to get himself to triple elixir for that to really be super duper efficient. And at the moment, he's finding himself in a little bit of trouble here. Going to go pretty significant Hog plus the Stab Goblins, and this should result in a Hog shot here as the Goblin Brawler not able to solo counter because of the Goblin pressure behind it, not to mention the Mighty Miner up front.
Thrill's in a great spot. At least in my opinion, I feel like, you know, we're about to get to double elixir here. He already sees how much of an advantage he has in terms of his cards. You cycle the Royal Recruits in the back, right? When they're coming across the bridge, you just get Skeleton Dragons over the middle. There's no way to stop those Skeleton Dragons. You don't have a big spell if you're Ruben. I mean, unless he's not using Earthquake here, which could happen. And then you've got the Cage to always deal with that Hog. So I just think that there's an opportunity for Thrill to take some damage here and then really just overwhelm and overrun this game.
I like what Ruben's doing right now, getting the Tesla set up, protecting on the inside, cycling Firecrackers. Arrows will probably come to that Firecracker on the right. Nope, decides to let the Skeleton Dragon try to do it on its own, and this is now going to put a little pressure behind and force the Barb Barrel out. Hog goes back to the left-hand side. This is all nice stuff from Ruben.
Yeah,
look,
it really is.
I don't like the predictability of it, but when you see him play it, you understand why he goes there over and over again, because he is very good at this style of gameplay.
Yeah, and now you're seeing what Inthril should be doing, which is the recruits are coming across the bridge, skeleton dragons over the middle, arrows for that firecracker. It was a little out of sequence, so I think that he needs to maybe clean that up a bit. He's got all the options. I mean, he's got all the tools in his toolbox. It's just about utilizing them in the correct way. I don't think taking any more hog shots is the way to do it. I think that Goblin Cage and Brawler need to be ready to go from here on out. But otherwise, I still think Inthril is in the driver's seat. This is one for Ruben to steal.
Well, that 8-6-8 on the left-hand side, courtesy of the Skeleton Dragons, which are one of the problems here, right? It's very difficult for Ruben to deal with these Skelly Drags, and so you're seeing Inthril try to abuse them the best that he can. Firecracker behind the Tesla now, Ice Spirit, and this is what he has to do. This is what Ruben has to do if he wants to survive this game, is take out these Skeleton Dragons and then create opportunities. And that right there, though, was a lot to be spent. And now you have a banked Brawler, does take one very important shot, Lumberjack cycled, and a big elixir advantage right now for Inthril.
And we need to see those Skeleton Dragons over the middle. I don't know why we're not seeing them. It is crazy to me. He's making this, I feel like, a lot harder than it needs to be.
And here they go behind the Ram Rider. Is the log available for Ruben? And it is. Ice Spirit to control some Skeleton Dragons, but one gets away, and that's all you really need here.
Yeah, now we can just cycle a couple arrows, but Ruben still has time to take this tower. This hog gets a couple hits, and now you see the overspend, and now the hogs come in, and that is an easy game number 2 win. I gotta say, though, it should have happened sooner, and it should have been easier. I feel like, I mean, yes, you're going up against one of the best in the world in Ruben, and maybe that's why. And maybe that was just the whole thing with, like, Ruben's pressure was making it so that Inthril couldn't sequence his pushes the way that he needed to. But I think we saw the writing on the wall very, very early on. The fact that Ruben brought that tower to just below 700 is, I think, the most impressive part of that game number 2.
Ruben did a really good job of controlling the defensive side of the board against a couple of big pushes, right? Just some nice, clean, controlling cycle play. And I think what Inthril realized was that he didn't need to hurry, that he was going to get away. As long as he didn't overcommit and overspend and try rushing to win, as long as he locked down his defenses, he was going to eventually get damaged, because you can stop those Skelly Dragons once, you can stop them twice. You can't stop them 3 times over and over and over again, and so much of the damage had come from those Skeleton Dragons. So what I liked from Inthril there, and I agree with you that maybe we could have seen a little bit more of the Skeleton Dragons, but I liked the maturity there. I liked the not rushing it out of Inthril, and that was a key for him recognizing that the game was in hand as long as he didn't get caught looking.
Yeah, and I think that's, from the beginning of that game, it was very obvious that Inthril should have the matchup advantage. Even if you just talk about the fact that he never used the Ram Rider to defend the hog ever. Like, that just didn't even happen in that game. That's the kind of a luxury, right? If you have so many other responses that you don't have to use that. I love that he didn't do what Todd did, where he got too comfortable. I just feel like he maybe let Ruben get a little closer than he needed to be, but I agree. He did show great maturity. If you know you have that matchup from the beginning, and you slow play it the entire time, you just do what you need to do, you take damage where you can, and you come out with a win. And I agree. I think that was good. I wonder if there was a better way to play that game, but it doesn't matter. Here we go on to game number 3. They both find themselves with really tough matchups. In terms of game number 1, we didn't even see how Inthril lost that tower in the first 45. Game number 2, we see that Inthril has a great matchup advantage and then slow plays it out till the end. And now here we are in game number 3, and we get to do our favorite thing, which is looking at what's been played and where you go from there. And
I still think that Ruben, I really like Bowler E-Giant for Ruben here to hedge against the possibility of a lot of swarmy stuff. I might have actually been a better situation in the matchup we just saw as well if he gone Bowler E-Giant in that one. Recruits are out, but I don't see Inthril completely avoiding swarmy stuff on the ground. So I think that the Bowler E-Giant covers a lot of bases here for Ruben. On the other side for Inthril, my suspicion here is that Ruben goes to one of his big 3. So I would love to see him run something with either Inferno Dragon or Inferno Dragon and NATO, or with a building just to cover Loon, RG, and Hog Rider.
Yeah, and you know, I wouldn't hate if we saw Inthro go to Graveyard here, just because I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Ruben just run that Hog deck back. And thank goodness he doesn't. Miner comes out early on.
All right, like that. A little different from Ruben.
Now he might just be going straight to, you know, Miner Bats Wall Breakers. The E-Spirit changes that up a little bit because, you know, Ruben could use the Ice Spirit, but instead it's the E-Spirit.
Inthro going back to the same deck from game number 1 here. And it's Ruben with the Inferno Tower, getting a nice read. But what will he do about these bats? The Electro Spirit is certainly going to be a big factor.
And Flying Machine. Okay, Inthrill. A little bit of a change up there.
Okay, Inthrill. We see ya.
And now the aggressive Goblin Giant at the bridge opposite lane. Okay. Very fascinating deck here from Inthrill. Ruben just playing this control deck, as you do, getting some good Miner chip in. Now that Recruit is going to tank for this Miner, going to give it an extra couple shots. 2669. Tower ticking down to below 2300.
And this is one of the things that kind of separates the S tier from the A tier, right? And it's a question, it'll be the question that we have to answer, whether Ruben is going to be playing in his former S tier form at Worlds or not. And that's the ability to play not just the 8 meta decks you've been playing a bunch that you grind on ladder, but make 1 or 2 card adjustments and still play it very, very well. I'm looking at the deck pool from Ruben, and this specific deck played nowhere in the last 7 days. It's not an abnormal deck, it's not a strange deck, it's not a deck he's grinding reps with. He's played very similar stuff, but not this. And that's going to be one of those things where at World Finals in particular, the ability to be able to play those slight adjustments and still play it at the highest level is what's going to separate the top from the middle.
Poison nice to have there if you're Ruben to deal with the Flying Machine. Flying Machine felt like kind of one of the X factors in this matchup, but now you at least have the ability to take it off the board. The E-Spirit also a really interesting card. I mean, the Mother Witch with her bats behind all of a sudden become a lot less threatening. Inthrill opting to go with dual lane pressure, but getting the Night Witch, sorry, Night Witch instead of Mother Witch earlier, but opts to go with the Night Witch to the right-hand lane instead of supporting his Goblin Giant. So kind of interesting pushes being put together from Inthrill as I think he's kind of feel his way through this matchup. The best thing for Inthrill is that you have 2 cards, 3 cards in the Skeleton King, Mini P.E.K.K.A, and Knight that you can basically always cycle behind that right-hand Princess Tower and not really worry too much about poison value coming in.
I'm very curious to see if Ruben has a chance of actually losing this game because with this triple spell, right, he can create so much pressure offensively. And then if the way he can lock things down with the delivery, poison, E-Spirit, and Inferno Tower, not to mention just that the log can knock back to create room when you're in a pinch and clear these things off right here. The Flying Machine really isn't a concern. You can poison it off behind this or wait till it crosses and get delivery down. And here you go, boom, delivery on top of all that, and the shots from the Flying Machine covered. This should be a pretty easily controlled win for Ruben, unless he just loses control of the board at some point and Inthrill overwhelms.
Yeah, it's like you think about what Inthrill has to do, and it's like I think he needs to get a Night Witch, an Evo Night Witch push down one lane, and then a Goblin Giant Skeleton King down the other. And that is a ton of things that need to happen for Inthrill to go absolutely perfectly, because otherwise Ruben is just going to do exactly that. He's just going to cycle back to another Inferno Tower. You've got to figure out a way to create dual lane pressure, bait out the poison on the Flying Machine so that your Night Witch is able to get value. And that's just like too much to ask, I think, right now.
He's so far ahead of Inthrill game plan-wise right now, too. You saw the real close attempt on the right-hand side, but the Poison High took care of the Flying Machine. He was protecting the Inferno Tower with a nice E-Spirit, and then getting the delivery down to cover again. Just really nice stuff here. And again, we're going to see the same sort of sequence being played at the opposite side, making sure that Inferno Tower just stays up. And this was just perfect control gameplay, trying to find a way for this Rage to put enough damage down, but the Knight will clear that up, and will also pick up the Flying Machine and Ruben. Just perfect pick, perfect play, and he will stay in our upper bracket as we finish the first round of play.
Yeah, I mean, even at the end there, Inthril goes Goblin Giant, Night Witch left-hand side, Flying Machine over the middle. It's offset to the left instead of the right, so he's giving just too much poison value. I would love to see that matchup played 10 times, maybe 20 times, 10 from each player switching, and I just see how many times that Goblin Giant deck could actually win and what you would need to do to win with it. Because you look at the sample size and it's like, it doesn't really do us justice. I mean, there's only 34 examples in total. None of them have 7 or 8 cards matching. But this matchup felt like 100-0 in terms of two people that know what they're doing with the decks, and there's just no way to navigate through it. I mean, again, you've got to figure out a way to get like an Evo Knight plus Night Witch push in one lane, or like a Goblin Giant Night Witch push in the one lane. So, and then the Skeleton King plus a tank in the other lane with the Flying Machine over the middle. How many elixir is that? Like 30 that I just mentioned? And then you still have to worry about the fact that you can't ignore the miners. So I love what Ruben did there. And yeah, Rich, I think just about as perfect of a deck pick you could get in that game.
Yeah, it was very, very nice play from Ruben, and just you know, again, we kind of get the knock on him. We call it his big three, the Loon, RG, and Hog Rider. We saw one of those in here on this one, and it's not like Ruben can't play the rest of those things. It's just that for some reason he hasn't played the rest of those things, and we saw that being played very nicely. And we saw, look, to be fair, the micro in the game before that with the Hog Rider game was really solid micro as well. He was just in a much worse matchup situation.
Yes.
This time the micro was on point. And so that's the kind of, if we see that Ruben at World Finals, his stock is going to be much higher. It's just the question of, do we see that same kind of gameplay once we make it to World Finals? Let's take a look though right now, Andrew, at what we've done so far and where we're going next.
That's right. We're about to take a break here and come back to some incredible action. Few more matches coming your way today. We're essentially halfway through our day, but a little bit less because in the losers bracket, the lower bracket, whatever you want to call it, the elimination bracket, those are both best of 5. So Molite, Nakaza, Clown, and Ruben still in that upper bracket. Then in the lower bracket, Ta and Venpers, Inthril, and Vitor will be saying goodbye to 2 of those competitors before the end of today. And right now we're not saying goodbye, we're just saying we'll see you in a few minutes as we're going to take a break here at Royal Masters. Rich and I will be back to cast the last handful of matches and, like I said, say goodbye to 2 of our competitors. Don't you move a muscle.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Royale Masters Playoffs Weekend. 2 days of action, double elimination bracket, the Royale Masters dual mode format, and we have a few more matches today. Andrew, we're going to say goodbye to 2 of our competitors, get down to our final 6, and move closer and closer to giving out the biggest chunks of that $10,000 prize pool.
Yeah, a couple upsets that have happened early on. We're seeing a really great couple lower bracket matches coming your way. But first, we got to keep working through the heavy hitters that have been strong throughout the day. Obviously, Mo Light started things off against Venpers, basically unscathed. And thank you so much, Tasty, as we get to this bracket. You see there, Akaza and Ta, that was probably the biggest upset in round number 1. It's hard to call Clown versus Vitor an upset because of how good Clown is. The only reason you can say it is just because Vitor's going to World Finals this year. And then at the bottom of your screen, a great full set there between Ruben and Inthrill. And, you know, Rich, Inthrill showed some really great maturity, some great poise when he had a great matchup. Ruben, on the other side of it, showed us that he is still that guy. Yeah. He's still got the micro, he's still got the macro, and even today he brought some decent deck picking because, again, yes, it's a little bit predictable in game number 2 for him to go with one of his big 3, but still, that's only a 33% chance that you're getting Hog Rider, and he went with a little bit of a different version than what we're seeing. He played very well through a tough matchup and was able to take the dub in game number 3, even though he dropped game number 2. So I gotta say, I'm very happy with everything that we've seen today. There hasn't been something where, like a glaring thing where I'm just like, what are you doing, man? Other than just the one moment with our good friend Ta, where it really felt like a what are you doing, man moment with a great comeback win.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun here so far, and just want to take a moment to revisit the format differences because I've seen some questions in chat. Someone said, hey, Inthrill played Arrows 2 games in a row. What's going on? This is Royale Masters version of dual mode, which is ever so slightly different than what you're used to. So normally you're used to in duels, hey, you can't repeat cards no matter what. In the Royale Masters format, you only lose cards that you win with. So here we see a nice little example. If in game number 1 we see this interesting matchup, player number 1 wins that game, can no longer play with those cards for the remainder of the best of 3 or best of 5. More on that later. But if you lose with a deck, you can keep playing with that. Normally, if you play normal style duels where everyone loses both decks, it's really hard to play a best of 5 because by game 5, each player has 32 cards they can't play with, and you're making kind of nonsense decks by game number 5. This version, essentially, when you reach game 5, it's similar to when we reach game 3 in a normal dual mode battle in a best of 3, where both players have 2 decks they can no longer use.
And it looks like Akaza could maybe be going with the deck that Mo has been running all day, I should say, not all week. It's only been 24 hours. And someone's asking, just a really quick aside here, can someone send the Discord link of Royale Masters? It's right there on the screen. You can just go discord.gg/RoyaleMSTRS to join along with everything that is Royale Masters. So anyway, Akaza going back to playing the deck that Mo has been playing all week. Mo going to Golem once again, but this Inferno Tower is a really great card to have, as is that Archer Queen, because earlier at least Mo did not have a big spell. And now you do still have the opportunity to create some dual lane pressure so that your opponent cannot just go crazy with big beatdown cascading golem pushes.
Yeah, this will be really fascinating. The delivery will do some coverage. I don't know what the attacking spell is, and an Earthquake on top of that. So this is starting to look really nice for Akaza. The King Tower activation certainly will be a factor, but he can shut down those pumps very easily. The Inferno Tower with some nice protection for it as well. This is going to be an interesting riddle for Mohamed Light to try to solve.
Yeah, great word for that, because at least in my experience, I mean, I'm already a little surprised that Mo played that Elixir Pump, just because he would have to assume that the last card is going to be Earthquake. So I'm just really curious to see, because most of the time when you are playing an Elixir Pump deck, if your opponent has Earthquake, you just stop playing it, period. And I'm wondering if that's what Mo's going to do moving forward, even though I feel like he probably knew it was in there when he dropped it the first time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if he was just using it to confirm that there's a that there's an Earthquake in there, right? As opposed to just, you know, if it's a Fireball, the story does get a little bit different. Maybe that was part of the reason. I love the 3-1 split here because you don't want to really spend on that left-hand side. Unfortunately for Akaza, because of the body block, it's the one that goes and gets the King Tower aggro first. Either way, this is feeling like a pretty good situation. Although the Electro Dragon could end up being an X factor here.
Yeah, and Mo recognizes that. He goes sell-out push here. Those Evo'd Skeletons not going to do anything at all other than just distract for a moment. And yes, he's distracting and staying alive, but he's giving a massive elixir advantage to Mo. That's the good thing, at least, about this deck that Akaza is playing, is it is one of those decks that you can overspend and still recover defensively if you know all the right moves. And I got to admit, Akaza did way better in that defense than I thought he was going to initially with those barbs on the left-hand side.
Yeah, holding on for the moment. The barbs to split the Inferno Tower focus, the Electro Dragon to threaten it. Does certainly have the ability, now that we're in double and on a triple, to create some real problems for for Akaza. Needs to get the delivery in the mix here, and there it will come down just to hold, but this is so much starting to pile up, and Akaza looks like he's in a world of trouble! GG, well played. Mohamed Light takes over in double elixir.
You watch him play anything, and he's so good with it, but like watching him play Golem, just because of like when he became who he is in the game, where Golem has been in the meta for like the last year, it's just wild to see him come out and play it and look like he's been the best Golem player in the world forever, and we just didn't know that about him. The control he has, the understanding he has of the macro matchup when he knows where to take damage, making his opponent defend uncomfortably, like all these things come together really beautifully for Mohamed Light. And, you know, you look at the stats of this matchup, and it's really not that bad, right? This is literally the matchup you want to get most of the time, right? If you're at a 46-54 situation, then it really does mostly just come down to skill. And, you know, Mo Light, he pokes and prods, I guess, in terms of playing that pump. It was obvious that it was the pump against the EQ, but like you said, if that's a fireball, it completely changes the conversation. So he goes, how do I figure that out before spending too much elixir? Let's drop the pump. EQ comes out. Now I know I can create that barb push in one lane and pile everything behind the Golem in the other. And that's basically it. Inferno Tower gets distracted, NATO everything together, see in game number 2.
Yeah, that was really tough going overall for Akaza, and I see it's 7 of 8 out of the matchup, so I'm wondering what is the card that kind of changes the math between those two. What's the outlier in between these two? And it does feel like if there's anything that caused Akaza problems is he didn't put Mo under enough pressure during single elixir, right? He got some good overall attacks, but you know, it seems like maybe the hope would have been to put maybe one more really significant chunky bit of damage during single. The damage was split. There was neither tower that Mohamed Light had to be super duper concerned with. And by the time we got into double, he was able to cover defensively pretty well, not take big pieces of damage, and just a phenomenal job. And after a while, Akaza was just trying to play catch up with against the overwhelm game. I'm also really not in love with the Fire Spirit in this deck for Akaza. The Fire Spirit doesn't have any sort of... the Fire Spirit is just a damage dealer. It doesn't really have any legitimate defensive utility here. And there's a reason why we've seen the Fire Spirit drop dramatically in use, and it's because of how much work you can get out of the Ice Spirit and the Electro Spirit. I don't know if that would have changed the result here, but... And I understand that it's part of the historical version of this deck. I just don't love it.
Yeah, and you know, I think that your point about getting that damage in single, at least when I mean, my favorite people to watch play the game, or at least most regularly that I watch play the game, are Mo and Morton and Juicy, right? And those three guys, when I see them play against Beatdown, it doesn't matter if they have 4 elixir, 6 elixir, or 10 elixir. When a Golem or a Lava comes down in one lane, they drop 90+% of that elixir in the opposite lane. I don't know if Akaza couldn't do that. I mean, I remember he sent in Royal Hogs, but I think after you get that positive trade with the pump against the Earthquake, maybe you try to sell out there and you just go Royal Hogs with like a Lumberjack or like an Archer Queen behind or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. And then to go back to your point about the Fire Spirit, that Fire Spirit is meant as a poke and prod, but Mo never bid on that poke and prod. So he, Akaza wasn't getting that fireball's worth of damage that you can get for that one elixir. And so we have a little bit of lag. We didn't miss too much action. 2274 is the healthier of the two towers for Akaza. The lower of the two towers for Akaza. Other one down to 2772.
Well, we saw Akaza have some nice work with Loon earlier today. He played 6 Loon as opposed to Lava Loon in that previous matchup against Ta. Going back to the skies here one more time, hoping to find a little better result, or another good result, but of course he's up against Tesla Delivery Poison. So this will be interesting.
And then the little Ice Spirit there for some love. That snowball will allow the balloon to get a drop, so that's actually a really nicely timed snowball. I don't know if Mo expected it, and if he did, the reaction would just be too late. It'd be wasted elixir and still get that bomb drop, so Mo has a slight elixir advantage, but now is behind in damage.
What an interesting variation of minor control, right? You have the Tesla, you have the Evo Knight. When it comes to the air, all you have is the Tesla Delivery and the Ice Spirit, and you're up against Lava Loon. So I am sitting here racked with attention to figure out, how does Mohamed Light, are the Poison Delivery Ice Spirit Tesla, is that enough to continue to play defense against this and create legitimate offensive pressure the opposite direction? Or is this going to be too much for Mo to handle?
Well, Akaza did the brilliant, that was exactly what I had just talked about. If your opponent goes heavy beatdown in one lane, then you go sellout on the other. And what did Mo do? He went for a full sellout push on that right-hand side. And you saw how much elixir he baited out from Akaza. And look at what's happened to the towers. Now Akaza's sequencing in the way that he wants to orchestrate his pushes is a little bit off. Damage comes in both lanes for Mo. He's back around to a Tesla, I believe. There we go. And then should be able to just lock it down with an Ice Spirit after the balloon gets first shot.
And Poison to cover as well, but the damage still starting to lean towards Akaza, who will get the left-hand tower down to under 900 HP, close now, down under 800, so just keeping the pressure on in this lane is the Expo YouTuber, who's certainly flexing a deeper knowledge of the game than just some siege play with 1:42 left.
I really loved that Akaza pre-cycled his knight in the back and then cycled minions up at the bridge right when he dropped that Lava Hound down. He's been watching the way that Mo plays too. He knows the best way around it, and he knew that his opponent was going to sell out on that right-hand lane, and all he needed to do was have the Lava Hound down and one card to support. Whatever that card ended up being, it did not matter. And I think that is a really great job now just to fireball snowball away, and Akaza evens things up here in game number 2.
I am very curious as to what Mohamed and Jebas thought they were going to be facing here in that matchup, right? You're going with this really interesting ground-heavy control variation. Maybe they thought, hey, Akaza, let's cover Royal Hogs again because Akaza liked it. This would cover nicely against Hog, right, with the building plus the knockback plus a decent amount of DPS. But this really felt like the area where it would struggle the most would be aerial attacks, which we've seen Akaza go to already today, and there you have it. So I'm very curious as to what they were looking for matchup-wise with that deck.
Anything else? Honestly, other than maybe Royal Giant? But literally, I think, all the other things that are popular in the meta, whether it's Graveyard, whether it's Goblin Giant Sparky, whether it's, Hog EQ, you can keep up with the cycle, you could drop the delivery at the bridge. There's so many things that this deck matches up against, not to mention that it's Mohamed Light playing minor poison control with Tesla, right? Which is another just conversation in and of itself. I think that Akaza just went to the one blind spot. And yeah, those numbers, again, we don't have a lot of a sample size, but at least in the sample size we have, that was a glaring favorable matchup for Akaza. So I think Jebas and Mo maybe go, I don't know what he's going to run in game number 2. I don't know if he's going to go to the skies because that's pretty obvious. Why don't we just play a deck that kind of covers every other base out there? And he just unfortunately gets the matchup that he can't play through. I mean, And again, Akaza, I think, did a really good job with defending that right-hand lane. I think he knew exactly how Mo was going to try to create pressure. He stopped it immediately, didn't support the Lava Hound, didn't go for a tower trade situation, because usually when you're going up against Mohamed Light, he's got that next step figured out. He was already back around to an Evo Knight, but he still took a lot of damage from that Lava Hound. So I love what we saw out of Akaza in that game. Great deck pick.
That might, and that, you know what, that might have been Mo and Jebba's trying to cover Akaza's most popular deck this week, which is that the earlier mentioned E-Giant Archer Queen deck with the cannon in there as well, right? So they have they had the delivery there for the Archer Queen. You can pull with the Tesla, and you can avoid some lightning placements with the Tesla, knockback with the log, some DPS with the Knight. Maybe that's what they were trying to cover there. But either way, that's the past. Now moving on to the future, we have game number 3 in this upper bracket matchup coming on next. Andrew, thoughts on where we might go here in the third and final?
Well, I think the toughest thing for Akaza is the fact that Mo did what he did earlier in the day, which is he opened with Golem. And honestly, if I'm Mohamed Light, I think that that's a great way to keep going in terms of playing best of 3s and best of 5s, because coming back to your question, Rich, is I'm not sure, because the cards that are out for Mo are so kind of irrelevant in the meta, right? There's like pieces. The NATO is relevant. The Barbs are relevant. The Lumberjack kind of, you know, the Skeleton Dragons in certain, but the fact that there's still so many available real archetypes out there, not off meta, but really in the meta decks. I just love the Golem picks in both the first sets, because yeah, game 2 doesn't go the way Mo wants, but now he has information on his opponent, and he has to, you know, he can think about all these things that he doesn't have to worry about now in terms of what his opponent has played, you know. And also you take the Fireball and the Snowball are out of the equation. Maybe you just go to Hog Rider, right? Yes, you can run into NATO, which is fine, but the fact that Barbs and Snowball are out, you don't have to worry about dealing with stuff in the skies, which is where Hog Rider can really struggle if it's like, you know, Firecracker EQ. So yeah, maybe Mo goes to something like that.
Well, we'll find out here in a couple of moments as Akaza opens up with Goblins, and Mo immediately rages them in return. And now, this is interesting here. You know, part of what I've said this before, I do wonder, with World Finals so close around the corner, what the priority discussion is right now, right? You know, hey, you can win an okay amount of money here. There's a $250,000 grand prize coming up, plus a world championship. How much deck information, how much thought process does Jebba's and Mo want to expose here? But also, with some new cards on the way, how concerned are they with what's likely to be a potentially seismic meta shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation, he does end up going to Hog, obviously, with this kind of compilation he's been playing. I think that conversation, Rich, does definitely change with exactly what you're saying. I think that earlier throughout Masters, we were really concerned about that, but we are going to have such a radical meta shift that I think that kind of becomes a luxury for guys like Mo and Jebba's, to where they don't have to worry as much about being kind of spotted before Worlds. Or, you know, I think that they can kind of show their full hand, because those Evo'd Archers and whatever that new champion is, they always like to do it right before World Finals, don't they?
It's the best. It's the best advertising moment of the year.
Yeah, true.
Hope we get to set and they've just done a giant statue of the Archer's feet. People can take pictures. They had that P.E.K.K.A. last year at the entrance. They just have a giant Archer foot. All right, here we go.
Clash Royale community woke up with that, and then all the bookmarks were also hilarious.
The bookmarks were wild. Bro, just take a screenshot if you need it that bad. Bookmark?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. The Fish Boy, completely controlled by the Mega Knight. Hog slides on through, and this deck doing exactly what it's designed to do. Clog up your lane, give you a bunch of things to look at that are beefy and frustrating, and then get a Hog all the way on to that tower. Although this dual lane pressure from Akaza is a real problem.
Yeah, Mo takes a lot there, and wow, now he's in lightning range. After that lightning comes in, Royal Ghost gets that shot, and Mo just eats the tower because he knows it's going to go down anyway, and now has to do a full sellout push. And Rich,
nope,
the upset of the day.
Yeah, very, very well picked here by Akaza, and GG, well played. Put a feather in your cap there, son. You just took a best of 3 off the best in the world to put yourself in our upper bracket final.
Yeah, wow. Mo just really, really struggling in games 2 and 3 there to create the offense that he needed without having to sacrifice too much defensive presence. I mean, we saw that in game number 2, right? You do what you think you have to do against a beatdown deck. Beatdown comes down, you sell out in the opposite lane, then you go into game number 3, you do end up going to Hog Rider, but your opponent's got Fisherman, and then they've got the Evoed RG, which, you know, you think that the MK and Prince would be able to stack up a little bit more damage there, but Akaza plays a great one.
I mean, the big key moment there was the Royal Ghost pressuring the right-hand lane that required the response. And then you go, oh, yes, well, if you're looking at that, I also happen to have an evolved Royal Giant that just goes down the opposite lane as well. And that deck did a great job in this situation. He defended, took the damage he was going to take, and then fired back once he saw an opportunity to put pressure in 2 lanes, which, you know, if there's one thing this deck could struggle against, is what we saw right there, is it's heavy, and so you start responding to the pressure in one lane, and the pressure on the other lane can be a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's the, you know, just to add to that, this deck really does succeed the most when you're able to get that MK Prince combo, right? You get the MK to clear the way, you get the Prince to deal with the heaviest, hardest hitting units with the highest HP, and then you can kind of sneak in the Hog behind or in the opposite lane at that point. But if you're breaking up where those 2 big guys are throughout the entire game, which, again, Akaza did a great job of making that happen, then Mo just not able to defend the way he wants, because the other thing is that those units all are very slow DPS, and, you know, the minions trying to work into the conversation, but the Phoenix plus the E-Spirit are just enough, I think. And Akaza with the big upset here. Mo Light still alive down in the lower bracket. We won't see him today, but we will see him tomorrow fighting for his life and back in a situation that he's usually pretty comfortable with. Whoever Inthrill or Vitor, whoever comes out on top of that, will be going up against Mo Light. So that is a tough back-to-back elimination situation. Now we go to Clown and Ruben. Any other thoughts on Akaza and Mo, Rich, before we move on?
Well, now, first of all, very well played Akaza, nicely done. I think the Rage was kind of a funky card to be in that deck and ended up finding no real home. And that was kind of a big problem. And now we see Mo in the lower bracket, which, again, as I see people go, Mohamed Light, what happened? What's going on? He's used to the lower bracket. I want to make one very big point about this lower bracket. Every elimination match in this competition is BO5s. So from now on, anyone who plays Mohamed Light is playing a best of 5, and that is a very different conversation than a best of 3. That the more games you give Mo, the more games you give any 2 players, the more likely the better player comes out on top, and the more games you give Mo, best of 5, it's going to be very difficult, I think, for anyone to unseat him. I almost think it's a better place for him to be on this lower bracket in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, that best of 5 is something he's really well versed in and has a lot of support. Speaking of support, big shout out here to Adrian Piedra in Clash Royale in the chat. Hey. Nothing but love for you, man. Always happy to see you. Miss commentating on your matches, but glad that you're still hanging out in the space here, still supporting. It's crazy. We've known Adrian now for 6 years.
Yes, sir.
You know, as long as we do this, right? It's like we've known these guys for like a quarter of their lives at this point. And yeah, it's always great to see someone like Adrian in the chat. But now we go on. We move on to another. You know, you go to the same conversation that we had in round number 1. It's a world finalist against someone who feels like, I'm sure, should have been a world finalist. We got Ruben going up against Clown. And yes, Ruben may be a world champion, but Clown has shown that he can really hang with the best in the business.
And looking like we're seeing at least a version of that same Royal Hog Cycle deck that we saw earlier. We'll see if Ruben is also playing the Fire Spirit here, or if he's opted for something that gives it a little bit more defensive utility. And yep, the Fire Spirit it will be.
I want to see the skeletons matter in competitive. They've started to matter on ladder, and they've started to show up in a few decks, but I still feel like in the competitive scene, we have yet to see the skeletons go off. And I feel like the fact that they are showing up in the meta, the fact that that buff actually mattered, it's just a matter of time. I want to see him go crazy.
And little log cycle here. This is a really fascinating matchup to see Clown going with this super defensive minor control deck. And I kind of feel like we're watching like Clash Royale from a year or 2 years ago, even though the Evos are involved.
Really nice pre-log there from Clown, and that's just the type of player he is. We're this early in the game, we're only one cycle through, and he is already predicting your Evo'd Skellies, so, you know, just gives Ruben a moment of pause and goes, okay, all right, got to remember who I'm playing against.
And Queen will get picked up, and no point in activating the ability against a moving knight. And that's one of the things that, you know, you talk about a lot of people talked about, hey, why aren't we seeing more champions mixed with Evos? You know, the 3-card cycle, plus you get evolutions which need cycles to play. Why aren't we seeing more of that? And part of it is because the champions often kind of share similar roles. You talk about the Monk, you talk about the Skelly King, you talk about the Golden Knight. Most of the champions are kind of mini tanks, and so are most of the best Evos. And then the one that stands out, the Archer Queen, well, the 2 most popular Evos, or the 3 most popular Evos, are the Barbs, the Recruits, and this Evo Knight, which shuts her down, like as well as anything in the game. And you just kind of understand now why these champions just not really finding their place in the meta at the moment.
Yeah, and that's a 6-for-3 trade, too, to add on top of that. I think with the Archers, like with the Bats, I think what they assumed with the Bats is we will see that happen. I think there's a great opportunity for Mighty Miner Archer combinations, Skeleton King Archer combinations, whereas I feel like before it felt like you're really forcing the issue. This deck right here is what feels like people are really trying to make happen in terms of Evo plus champion. It's just that the Evo in this situation is it's the skeleton, so it's not that exciting. This Archer Queen, though, is pretty exciting for Ruben.
I was going to say, you need the delivery to come out here. Look, you have 2 tremendous AQ counters in the delivery and the Evo Knight, and you have the Tesla with, you see not playing the gobs here. He probably wants to save the delivery primarily for these Royal Hogs, but Clown should be able to defend these without significant difficulty.
You see a big breath there from Ruben because he just keeps getting Miner poisoned, and he has no good response for it. What do you drop on top of a Miner poison, Rich? You drop a delivery, I guess, right? There you go. Delivery plus log. This time he doesn't pull the trigger on the poison because he's done it the last 2 or 3 times. And yeah, I really like the way Clown is playing this. He's making Ruben play really uncomfortably. He's changing up his offenses. He's changing up his defenses. And that's exactly what you have to do.
And there you go. Happy to just Miner poison right into those skeletons. And now the Queen.
You see the AQ. Yeah, that's rough, man. That's really, really rough to now have a whole cycle of your AQ out on the wrong side of the board.
Well, maybe you could create some dual lane pressure and maybe get some pigs doing a little bit of different stuff. Who knows? And probably not, because that AQ's dead to the world.
Yeah, Clown just goes, all right, let me get that second poison down on this one Archer Queen. Now goes back to Miner log for the Skellies, then poisons in case the delivery comes down. And that's it. I mean, you talk about a matchup conversation that you don't want to be involved in. Ruben could lead that TED Talk.
Yeah, that was rough. I'm pretty sure Ruben ran this earlier, right? I don't love bringing it back in. Let me just double check that before I speak out of turn. But I'm fairly sure. Oh, maybe he didn't. Maybe someone else ran this one earlier. I know we've seen it today. I thought that he had run it earlier as well.
Second time. I can't remember who ran it either. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the matchup with Ice Spirit delivery and Tesla and a fast cycle, because you're going 2.8 against 3.0. That hog deck isn't as cheap as you might think it is. It might feel like it's a 2.8 deck, but it's just a little heavier. The whole thing is that having the Archer Queen down is supposed to speed that up. But when you have that matchup, it's really tough. And, look at that. Sample size, it's only 6 to 8, so that's missing a lot of information, but it's 50-50. I feel like you add in whatever those other 2 cards are, and this conversation, at least at the highest level, probably changes. I think this is one of those, even if it was even at a lower level, I think if you talk to the best in the world, it feels like you should pretty much always be able to keep up with this deck on the right-hand side if you have Miner poison control.
got
with
a little
delivery.
I just got a little insight here from Mr. Cena, aka Droy, who's been having a great year in Clash Royale as well. Who gave me the info that, and I didn't realize this, that this is primarily looking for maybe a lava snipe, but more importantly, the Fire Spirit plus delivery kills skeleton dragons, kills flying machine, whereas whereas delivery plus ice spirit doesn't do the same thing. So if you're concerned about flying machine, concerned about the skeleton dragons, that's why the Fire Spirit works out really well in that deck.
Yeah, and you have to be, right? That's the only really way to get on top of units like that with that deck. You never want to have to be in a situation where you're just dropping your Archer Queen like up high at the river and then immediately using the ability just to snipe off something like a flying machine. Not only is it a negative trade, but you're never going to get that 3-card cycle, all of that. So shout out to Droy. Thanks for, a little bit of the insight there. And, we move on to game number 2 where, Clown has just been great today. And I guess it's just because he's playing against like the Vitors and the Rubens and in the past the Mohammed Lights of the world, but it's not a surprise when you see him play this well. This is just who this guy is. It still impresses me, I guess, because we're watching his great ascension. And Ruben going right back to the well, and it looks like he's not going to be happy about what he's running into. This deck, most likely with E-Giant, should be able to just deal with this deck with the AQ very easily. And there you go. Clown already knows what his matchup is, already knows this bomber's going to get some value. And Ruben, I mean, that's a tilting first 40 seconds.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. And you can see not happy with it. And going back to the same well again, we haven't seen it much today. Haven't seen it much at all as of late. And he's got to be a little frustrated right now, as you can see kind of the look on his face.
Yeah, Ruben definitely a guy where you can tell when he's feeling the nerves and when he's feeling the frustration. Great King Tower activation there by Clown. And Clown has that unfazed look of a killer. He's got the Tim Duncan look that you just don't want to run into. He is really impressed with his maturity, his poise, all the things. And Ruben has an uphill battle here.
Yeah, I mean, I like that Ruben said, hey, you played the Evo Knight, you played the delivery, I'll go Queen again. And Clown, we talked about this earlier today, was hedging against the stuff that you just played the counters for. And Clown did a great job hedging here. And I think this will continue to look pretty nice for him.
Yeah, and I also love that he goes aggressive with that lightning early on the Archer Queen. Not really that aggressive in that situation because it's such a good trade. And then he goes, cool, I don't even need to play my win condition until we get into double, because that's where I'm really going to start to put the hurting on.
And Pigs in onto the cage.
And maybe an E-Giant? No, he goes with his Evoed Recruits here. And does have enough elixir to do basically anything he wants. Maybe just a Baby Dragon over the middle, instead goes Bar Barrel over the middle, and now gets his E-Giant.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. And now here you go to get behind in case those skeletons come out. I think Evo Skellies are specifically in cycle, and no, it's just regular, but those skeletons are gonzo. And look at that. Now? Look at that.
Yeah,
Ruben shaking his head.
Yeah, he's just like, what on earth am I supposed to do? And Scythe here. Why is Ruben running the same deck? Is that part of the format? Yes, sir, it is. When you win with a deck, you cannot play it again. When you lose with a deck, you are able to play any of the cards in any combination that you want. If you want to run it straight back, you can. If you want to change up one card based off the information you got, you can. And now we see Clown finally with a little bit of a smile going. Yeah. Today has been a very good day of Clash Royale.
Very, very good day for Clown. And that's another solid win for him against... I mean, how many times do you get a chance to beat a former world champion? Well, Clown's had many of them, and he's taken a lot of wins. Again, this is a guy who has always been around for a long time. Many of you might know him more as Kick-Ash, but he hasn't been in the mix until this year, and it's been such a massive shift where he went from a guy you might see playing some semi-pro stuff here and there to a guy who's in the competitive conversation at the highest levels, and I really love to see it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just cannot say enough great things about him. I mean, even you just see the way that he builds his wins. I mean, look at the amount of times he played the cards that he needed. He literally did one E-Giant NATO push. That's all he had to do. He got his recruits down twice, so he had his Evo recruits out once. He played his Lightning twice. The first time was the aggressive one on the Archer Queen. He's not wasting any elixir anywhere. And then in between all that, what is he doing? Well, he's just controlling the board. He's just getting units out that he knows he can cycle. He's saving the Goblin Brawler for the Hog. Otherwise, it's just, all right, let's get the Evo, or let's get the recruits out so we have the Evos ready. Let's get the Bomber and the Baby Dragon out because they're not necessities in any way, right? And that's it. And then finally, once double elixir hits, cool, let me win the game.
Yeah, and win the game he did. I like the idea of, we haven't seen people go back to the same deck before. Ruben didn't work out very well for him. Of course, this is the upper bracket, so Ruben is going to stay alive and drop down into the second round of our lower bracket. That first round win guarantees you at least top 6 in this competition in the hunt for the bigger pieces of this $10,000 prize pool. But, of course, now he's going to go into the best of 5 range. And lucky for him, he's not matched up against Mohamed Light next round, but he will be awaiting the winner of one of our next matches here in just a couple of moments. And man, what a phenomenal run by Kickash. But now we move on into our lower bracket. I don't know if we have the full bracket look ready for us as we're preparing for our elimination matches coming up next, to best of 5s to whittle ourselves down just a little bit. But the journey that you have to go through now in this lower bracket, especially with Mo and Ruben both down there, becomes a lot more perilous.
Yeah, and you talk about Clown and his success today. The money really jumps up when you get into that top 4 spots, right? It becomes 5, 1K, then I think 25, then 5,000. Whereas building up there, it's just $100 increase each time. So Clown well on his way to winning some good cash. And yeah, like you're talking about, man, getting into this elimination bracket, the best of 5. This is where I think you're really going to see the separation of having a good analyst. Right?
Yes.
Like if you're, I always say this, and it's such an obvious statement, like if you lose game 1 and 2, you have to win game 3. But like, obviously you do, or else you're going to lose. But I think if in the game 3, you can't pick up a win at that point, it just shows that you haven't grasped how to play this format. Thank you so much, Stacey. Here is the bracket. And as you can see there, Akaza and Clown. I mean, of all the names that started, Akaza being up in the top is a big surprise for me. Clown, not so much, but when you look at what the bottom of the bracket was in Clown, Vitor, Inthrill, and Ruben, basically 4 world-class players, Clown coming all the way through, it just further emphasizes the point that he is no joke.
Yeah, and that's huge. And keep in mind, looking at that double image bracket, he didn't just move his way into the top 4. If you're in the winner bracket finals, you're in the top 3. The loser of that would drop down to play the lower bracket finals. So for both Akaza and Clown, they are in the big money on this one. I believe the top 3 prizes are like 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 or something like that. I don't remember the exact.
It's 15 to 25, 15, 25, and 5, I think.
There we go.
Tasty's always got our back.
Whoa!
It is 1,000. It is 25, and it is 5 there. So yeah, I mean that money conversation really changes. You 10x from 8th place to 3rd place, which is a pretty good feeling.
And you guarantee yourself a minimum of 1,000 here, and just all you have to do is win one more, and it's $2,500 for your troubles. So yeah, that's a pretty good spot for both of those guys. I know that Clown has been to the show before, right? He's played on CRL during broadcast where the money is starting to get pretty high up there. But for Akaza, this is definitely a big change for him. So very exciting moment. But right now we need to focus on our first BO5 of the day between Venpers and Ta.
And Venpers coming out with the big guns, just going right into it, right? Goblin Giant, Sparky, Mini P.E.K.K.A. using Mother Witch early in game number 1. We'll see then if Ta decides to go to Graveyard at all, but obviously that conversation only matters if Venpers wins game number 1.
And nice little Electro Spirit there to get the reset on the Sparky. And hold nicely, and a cheeky little counter push coming in when you don't have the Mini P.E.K.K.A. in cycle to deal with it. So
yeah,
plays the Rage Zap at the bridge to get the Firecracker off the board and allow those minions to defend against the Hog. But damage dealt lead for Ta with the first 90 seconds having ticked away.
want to see aggression in the opposite lane here, but Ta looks like maybe he's just going to opt to defend, maybe set up a Tesla early. There we go. Tesla early. We're still kind of far from double elixir, so maybe that's the better way to go. And that way you can get to a second Tesla if necessary. But Venper's making that conversation just a little bit different by going dual lane pressure here, and that Sparky doesn't get zapped, able to take care of the E-Spirit.
And that's a good rage. Will it turn into much more? I don't think so. And well defended, but damage in. Venpers now has taken the lead back. And once again, Mini P.E.K.K.A not in, and the zap not there to clear. We'll get 2 shots from the Hog.
Yeah, those minions come down, and they get a little bit of damage in. Easily cleaned up by the E-Spirit, and now we go with an early cycle on the EQ. Get the Tesla down again. There you go. You got the EQ back in your hand by the time you play a couple defensive cards if you need to drop it, which is never the best thing that you want to do, but sometimes really is a necessity when defending with this deck.
And you see the reason why Ta hasn't been going to opposite lane when the Sparky gets played, and that's because the best Hog counter that he's facing, the Mini P.E.K.K.A, is just available to easily pick that up. So he's waiting, and so far, Venpers has not once created a counter to Hog with a Mini P.E.K.K.A. And so far, as you can see, the results of that are devastation.
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge... I mean, you got the Valkyrie for the Barbs, which the Valkyrie, she's finally coming back in the meta just because of how popular Royal recruits are. Not even the Barbs, but just the recruits. And that Goblin Giant says, I don't care about your Tesla. I'm going to the tower. Gets a few swings in. That Sparky's going to get a shot on the right? No. Last second Valkyrie to turn it around. Great job there by Todd to kind of take a little bit of damage and get back in control of the game.
Yeah, this is where things start to get kind of dicey for Ta, right? This is a situation where, look, with the Barbs and the Mini P.E.K.K.A, Venpers should not have been giving up the Hog shots he's given. He's kind of put himself into weird, and there you go, finally gets a proper Hog counter there. He's put himself in kind of a weird spot, but it's a weird spot that, and I shamefully must admit, the last couple of weeks, last week or so, I've been playing quite a bit of the Goblin Giant Sparky. You know, get in where you fit in, folks.
That's right.
And against these Hog decks, once you get into this phase of the game, you can do a lot of nasty damage, but you have to not let that specific thing happen.
Yeah, and these Firecracker lineups going to get another shot there, and now another shot in, and then the zap, no, it doesn't chain, but the Firecracker still hits the tower, and now Ta is literally in an EQ cycle game. He just needs to play this defense once everything resets, and that's why Venpers is going all out, sell out, because he knows that that's where he's at.
He's going to go Hog now. I mean, he'll Barbs if you Hog now, never mind. Because the elixir is so high. Now he Hogs right into a set of Barbs.
EQ.
There you go. GG. The EQ does get some damage. And
Firecracker was just devastating in this matchup.
Yeah, you know, I have this very weird opinion that maybe some of the Evos are a little bit too much. I don't know. It's I think I might be the only person who feels this way, but it might be that some of the Evos could use a little bit of a knockdown from their high horses.
And that is the worst Evo you really want in terms of the Barbs and the Firecracker. The Firecracker can control those Barbs so easily, and then not having a big spell to deal with the Evoed Firecracker. Rage plus Zap is all you got, and that's a lot to spend on not getting much out of it. The matchup conversation is a lot more in favor of Venpers, but I wonder if this goes back to the whole pros and average people on ladder, and is that matchup really, because it doesn't feel like it's the 60-40. I mean, it doesn't really ever feel like it should be a 60-40, because you have a way to deal with the Mother Witch. She doesn't have a ton of targets, and the Valkyrie, I think, changes the conversation a little bit than the Knight, just because you have the AoE.
Yeah, it does dramatically. And again, remember, folks, that we are both in two different situations now. We are in the elimination phase of this competition, so the loser here will be out. And number two, we're in best of 5 territory. So as we're looking at this battle, we should be thinking about the fact that we're going to be going pretty deep into this one. There's at least a few more games, at least 2 more games left. And as Venpers is trying to figure out the math, look, here's the big question, right? If you're Venpers, knowing that you are outmatched, because frankly you are, do you just keep running variations of Goblin Giant Sparky until your opponent's out of ways to beat it? Is that what you do?
I mean, there's still, I think, because of what Ta played in game number 1 with the Evo'd Firecracker, I think he just goes to Evo'd Recruits in game number 2. I think that's probably the best way to go. And then in that terms, maybe yes, Venpers does, but I'd wait until game number 3. I think you got to make sure your opponent doesn't come out with the Evo'd Recruits against your Gob Giant Sparky deck. That's usually where you'll run into a little bit of trouble if they know what they're doing. So I'd love to see him change in game number 2 and then maybe go back to the well in game number 3, because realistically, there shouldn't be a lot of overlap between those two decks.
Big shout out.
Maybe not.
As I say, big shout out to our viewers on Twitch as well as YouTube. We are co-streaming on both. Official stream from Inside the Game on YouTube, but we have about 80 people plus watching on Twitch, including our co-caster and World Cyber Games champion, Juicy J. Shout out to Juicy. Thanks for being here, brother.
Juice. Love you, boy.
And the little King Tower activation to get things going for Ta as Vempers sets up the 3-3 split with the recruits.
Yeah, I like that, he switched up in game number 2. I think it's a really good plan. Even if Todd doesn't go with the Evo recruits, still the Evo Knight will give you a little bit of trouble if you're running that Sparky.
And does do just enough to get those Skelly Dragons taken care of by the Baby Dragon. It should get one Belch here, and I think Vempers just has to eat that one. 28-92 on the right-hand side, but the lead currently for Vempers in the left-hand lane by a little over 300 HP.
And this is the Golem deck that Mo ran earlier today, is it not? It looks very similar.
It certainly does have that look.
Yeah, it's got different pieces of it, I guess. Could still be something else.
And what an aggressive play on the left-hand lane. Lightning will clean a lot of that up, but you're still going to get a raged-up Ram Rider connection out of that one. So Ta covering, but not getting what he wanted from it.
This is where you need to get that big tank down, and there you go. Goes right into the weaker lane, takes the damage from the Mother Witch, and then, of course, Vempers goes with the 4-2 split towards the Golem. But this is where trouble comes in. You get the Golem up front, you have the Baby Dragon in tow, and then you get that NATO in, and all of a sudden, your defense just gets eaten alive.
Yeah, that was, and I think that Ta was probably just playing for damage mitigation. Use the Lightning. He did play 6 against 9 to reduce damage, and now go in heavy here. But this defense is thick enough to survive, and that's what we're seeing. Was that defense wasn't stuff that was going to get chewed up by the troops behind this Golem. Instead, they sit there and do their job for a while, and so now Vempers sets up one more time into that Golem lane, but keep an eye on that pressure on the right-hand side.
And I really like this, because the Evo Knight is going to come out, so what does Vempers do? He turns up the heat on the right side with the Skeleton Dragon, so now they create enough presence, they're going to get good damage in, and now the Baby Dragon is not really where you want it. Yes, it's still going to work towards the middle, but she's come out so late, and she is not working towards that left-hand tower.
Mother Witch low here to try to clog up this lane on the left-hand side. So far, so good, but that Lightning is going to do a lot. And now, look at this. Ta starting to be the one who gets dual lane pressure.
Yeah, wow, that Fireball was almost very, very bad. And luckily for Vempers, we got that Knight getting kited just a bit. 1611 to 1444, sorry.
It's still got a swing in, though, which Vempers has to be like, come on, Knight. How did you get that swing on there? And that's just, you can't be giving up that Baby Dragon Splash right there. You need every sliver of HP you have. So that's a Knight. That's a 1 HP Knight gets a swing, and being off by a half tile with a Ram Rider giving a Baby Dragon Splash into your weak side lane, or into your lane. And now look at this, just getting right at the bridge here with a big Golem Lightning push from Ta.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Golem Lightning pushes at the bridge, but Ta's obviously a much better player than I am, but that was just very, very aggressive. Ram Rider does not connect. A lot of elixir spent on both ends, and now another aggressive Golem up high. And I just don't know if this is going to work, because now he's still back to cage, and he has the Evo'd recruit, so now he has dual lane pressure. And, that's, again, I think why I was complimenting Mo so much as I do a lot of the time, but his ability to play this deck was pretty perfect, and Ta is struggling just a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know if there's really a winning move here. Not at this stage, with the arrows finally come out and put them outside of that NATO lightning range. GG, well played. Very well done by Venpers. Very, very well played, and just kind of some funky spots for Ta, especially in the latter half of that game.
Yeah, it just felt like Ta, you know, whether it was because of what Venpers did or because of Ta's maybe discomfort playing this deck, it just felt like some of those defenses he put a little bit too much on, or he just didn't know when to take the damage that he needs. I mean, that's one of the biggest things about Golem decks, is knowing when to take damage and how to defend by taking a little bit of damage but not losing your most important support card. Other part of that is that, you know, even though that NATO plus Baby Dragon combination with the Golem Death is a thing, those, like you said, Rich, those defenses were really, really tough to break through for Ta.
Yeah, those were difficult ones, but Venpers did the thing he had to do, right? He got us back to 1-1. Now we're going for a minimum of 4 games, and you know, you take a look at the decks we played. Game number 1 was the Hog EQ win for Ta. So Hog EQ, Tesla Log. You know what's interesting about this Hog EQ deck from Ta in game number 1? Log out, Goblins out. That really, those two together mean that anytime you face Cycle coming from Ta for the rest of this matchup, you're facing kind of a funky version of Cycle, right? Log in particular, right? Typically people, if they do run more than one Cycle deck in a dual mode matchup, they pair Hog with Snowball and Log with something else. Now Log being out, I think this is going to make Venpers' choices a little bit easier, because anything that does come in from a Cycle perspective, he's not super. It's going to be a little bit awkward. When he
I would
faces
love
it.
to see Venpers go Golem Pump, because just like what you're saying, Rich, you
EQ
don't
gone.
have EQ and you don't have Log, so minor Log is a little bit less likely in this game, right? You know, just like exactly what you're talking about with Cycle, is all of a sudden now you don't have an Earthquake to get on top of the pump, and you don't have a Minor to get on top of the pump. But with Golden Knight being shown early, it could be E-Giant. And now we see Firecracker.
Also maybe Drill here as a possibility.
Yeah, Drill Firecracker with Golden Knight. Definitely seems...
You don't get the King Tower activation.
So Ta with some mistakes early on. Cannon Cart, you know, wow. Haven't seen Cannon Cart much in competitive in a long time.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, Venpers does run a Drill Bowler. I was going to say, there comes the Bowler right there. But he typically runs it, I guess he does run this version a little bit, but I think he typically runs it with a Electro Dragon instead. Skellies are an interesting piece here as well, and that's probably to preserve the Goblins for a Cycle deck later in the match.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, certainly happy to have Bowler in this matchup. Would love to have them in the moment when the recruits come out. Looking like a balloon, 6-loon Cycle kind of situation from Ta.
Yeah, the Heal Spirit is... It's always a fun one. It's one of those cards that can be completely useless, or you'll see some of the best Heal Spirit plays of your life.
Right? Oh, Ram Rider. Never mind.
Ram Rider comes down.
And once the Heal Spirit's out, that makes sense. And the Bowler just helps, but still gives up a ton of damage. Either way, nice little counter push brewing. Venpers probably going to put a Firecracker. There you go, Evo Firecracker.
Exactly what you need to do. And yeah, Ta saw that coming from a mile away, but that being the X factor, or maybe the more important unit to deal with, the Golden Knight gets on top of tower. So great play there by Venpers, who is really holding it to our monthly finals winner back in 2022.
And going with both the E-Drag and the Cannon Cart in this one. So kind of an interesting one. Yeah, playing the, I guess, no Barb Barrel. So taking Barb Barrel out of play from this one, which normally would be in this deck, and going with just NATO as the only spell. So again, I think that part of this, I don't know how much of this is Venpers looking for a matchup and how much of this is trying to preserve some options for his third deck. Having, you know, having Barb Barrel and having Barb Barrel and having Goblins will give him a lot of nice options.
Yeah, I mean, having that Golden Knight gets
My
the
word.
tower, unbelievable. I mean, we haven't seen that in months, connections like that, but you love to see it after getting nerfed into Oblivion. Golden Knight has been a very important part of this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah, remember Golden Knight NATO was everything. And then now it has not been much, but here we go. Bowler to work against this Ram Rider left-hand lane. This looks like it's going to be pretty easy work for Vempers to hold off here against Ta.
Yeah, I mean, this deck is just that Vempers is running does really well against beatdown because you don't have a building that you really want to use on defense because of the drill, but you have things that kind of replicate with the knockback and the cannon cart and the NATO, all those things kind of coming together to where you can deal well with beatdown. And then, you know, this deck, just because I think of how beefy it is and how well it matches up right now, he doesn't even need to get too crazy aggressive with his drills. He's just able to kind of lock and stun everything and then get brutal counter pushes.
We're a full sequence behind it now, but the early Golden Knight ability 2 cycles ago and you saw there was a Bowler on the left-hand lane and Golden Knight on the right. And this should connect for some good damage as well. Wow. The early Golden Knight ability forced Ta to, instead of playing the recruits the way he probably wanted to play this weird high Ram Rider. And this whole sequencing being really awkward for Ta comes back to that really smart early activation of the Golden Knight ability to force out the less than ideal high response with that Ram Rider. And Vempers did a great job of not only deck picking here, but also making Ta really uncomfortable when he got the opportunity to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, because you're looking at the card that you kind of want to break the game with in your Royal Recruits, and everything on the other side of the board makes that harder. You've got the cannon cart's range, but really it's about the Bowler knockback, and of course that Firecracker. The E-Dragon is there to stop and stun that Ram Rider, and then the early Golden Knight dash. Those recruits pile up so quickly. There's usually also something behind them. So the NATOs to get on top of that Princess Tower, they don't even really have to be skill NATOs at that point. It's just NATO things to the tile that is closest to the tower, hit the 1 elixir button and hope for the best. And as we saw, Vempers, that really worked out quite a bit. Now up 2-1, Ta. Every single game is an elimination game for Ta now here out. And this is the game. I know this is like, duh. This is my favorite duh statement. Ta obviously has to win this so he doesn't get eliminated, but with all the information that's out, he should really be able to pick apart Vempers in game number 4 here. So Vempers now doesn't have Fireball, doesn't have Barrel, doesn't have NATO, doesn't have Lightning for his spells, right?
Vempers has Barrel. He doesn't have NATO. He's used NATO, arrows, and Fireball. Right?
I was looking at the wrong side.
In that Bar Barrel game, or in that last game, normally Bar Barrel is in that delivery deck, but he didn't play it this time around. So, and this is interesting because when you see Fireball arrows out, you go, cool. Well, Ta should maybe go something. Maybe Fireball arrows, NATO all out. Cool. Go Hog EQ and abuse Firecracker. But that's what Ta won with in the first game.
Yep.
So the Hog EQ Firecracker is gone.
I think you could go pigs here. You don't have to worry about King Tower activation. You don't have to worry about the Fireball. Yes, you have to worry about the building, but you should have EQ for that if you're Vempers. And yeah, I don't know. Sorry, if you're Ta.
Yeah.
No, Vempers. Yeah, Jesus. I don't know what is happening to me. I'm like looking back and forth here. That's what I'd like to see, I think, from Vempers. Sorry, if that makes sense now.
So yeah, Ta could run the pigs deck with Fireball out, with Bowler out, with all the different things out here. Ta could go that direction. With Vempers, the things that I really like here, I actually really like one of the MK Prince decks, right? Either MK Prince Hog, or at this point you're not worried about protecting Miner for a different deck, because if you win, it's game over. So we could run some version of the MK Prince Miner here.
And then you don't have to worry about the Piggies, which is a pretty nice draw right now, considering that Piggies have been played a good amount today. Obviously, Lightning could still come in to deal with the Archer Queen, but that's kind of like a very tough pick, right? Like if they're going to pick Lightning, then that's just what's going to happen. But I think I like that. I like Royal Hogs, and then if Vempers goes to the MK deck, it's just, is he good with that deck, right? Like that deck, the specific one that we've seen run a couple times has really become, it's a different version than the one that we saw like months ago. But has he had practice with it? Does he know how to play through those matchups?
Yeah, I mean, again, the Hog one was played a lot because you want to preserve Miner for other decks, but Vempers is if you win, you're through at this point. So he doesn't have to. He can opt between the Miner version or between the Hog version. NATO is still open for Ta. I'd be surprised to see something without NATO out of Ta at this point, especially because if you look at the win conditions that are available. Whether it be, and also Ta doesn't have log for knockback. Right, so I'd be very surprised to see Ta not go with NATO in this game, just because he has to cover a lot of win conditions and not having the knockback of the log. But we'll see.
Yeah, and Venper's on the other side of it too. I mean, Venper's also could just go to something that is control based. If you do think that your opponent could come out with Royal Piggies, you could still just go Miner Poison control. You still have the bomb tower if you want. Inferno is also interesting because we did see Ta go heavy earlier. And then, you still have to worry about the Goblin Giant. You still have to worry about the Golem. So this is why the best of fives becomes so difficult. And for everyone that's like listening in the chat about like these mental gymnastics that we have to do. I mean, imagine having to do it when the game is on the line, when the match is on the line.
What
and
just happened?
Just going for a quick cycle.
Was Ta just cycling his arrows to nothing? That must have been a misclick or something.
Well, I think he caught the spears, right?
Oh, the spears. Yeah, the spears. Never mind. Never you mind. I didn't see the spears come out. I looked over and saw the arrows and saw that they were there. And I guess they hit the spears earlier on.
So is this going to the skies here for Ta? And he
there you go.
And you know what? He's got Zap. He's got arrows. Vempers has his work cut out for him. And, game number 3, you should be in a situation where you can do that. Both these wall breakers will connect because that Barbarian is just a little slow on the swing.
Yeah, this is going to be bad, though, because this thing that you're doing here are going to get that on it. And then the bomb tower not going to pull the balloon. And then, you
don't even need to zap, honestly. Just save it. Save the elixir. If the balloon's on the tower, those spears, they're a non-factor.
Go to sleep. Go to sleep, Vempers. Oh my word.
It's just the worst when you play that deck. I mean, at least he has the Mighty Miner because that bomb can kind of help you sometimes when defending lava. But in general, when you have spears and bats against the lava deck with 2 small spells, you are in a lot of trouble.
And I guess he's not using an Evo in this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it looks like he's just not using an evolution at all. I mean, why not just use your Evo bats? You know what I mean? Like, even if they're not good, they're still better than, in my opinion, nothing. But maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, they are better than not being Evo bats.
Right? Like, they can't be worse. But Vempers maybe just doesn't even think about it because I think since Evo bats have come out, other than day 1, I think I've played against them 1 time. Legitimately.
I don't think even bats want to evolve. They're just like, no point.
It's too much work. They're already good enough.
So this is going to be an easy Game 4 win for Ta. Didn't take much to get it done.
See, and I think this is why I was thinking Miner Poison control. Like, most likely you're going to come into something a little bit heavy. I feel like Miner Poison control also usually gives you at least a decent matchup, whereas this deck, if you come up against anything in the skies, you basically just lose 100% of the time. So I don't love playing a deck that you can find those kind of matchups with decks that are like currently in the meta.
Yeah.
But that happens. That's just what you're supposed to do in game number 4 here. So Ta able to even things up, and we go on to game number 5. Now you guys get to hear us do that with even more cards out of play.
Well, here's the thing for Vempers is he doesn't have to play against Lava Loon again. So that's a nice thing at the end, where no Lava Loon this time around. And man, that just ran right through him. So now you talk about what's out for Ta. I think Vempers has the harder job here, right? Because Ta has played Log, has played EQ, and then just now Zap Arrows in terms of decks that he can't play, cards that he can't play anymore. I think it's much harder for Vempers to kind of game plan this one than it is for Ta to game plan this one.
Play bait. Play bait or play
Log and arrows both out. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I could see that, and I could also see if with Venper's, he's got recruits out. Yeah, I don't mind bait. I would love bait is real. It's a real thing, and especially bait with Inferno Tower. You know, it can help deal with those big beefier decks, and I think with those cards being out, you could at least find yourself in a good spot. But you know how to play bait.
Yeah, the big beefier decks though I do. I worry about I worry about what makes bait make sense against either E-Giant or Golem with the Electro Dragon, right? That makes me scared a little bit for bait. But yeah, with log out, with arrows out, both of those, that certainly does become a more enticing option.
Yeah, and also bait can kind of struggle sometimes against the dual lane pressure from the Royal recruits, which is nice. You can cycle princesses in the back to get a little bit more map control. Yeah, I don't hate that pull. Will it happen? Probably not, because we haven't seen bait like at all. But at least we've been seeing it on the leaderboards a bit.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I don't really know. Venper's obviously his deck pool not as well known as a lot of other players' deck pools. Like I said, he's played that MK Prince deck a whole bunch, and we saw that get countered. We saw that get brutally countered by Mohamed Light and Jebas earlier. And they'd even pointed out that he really hadn't switched his deck pool up very much in the last week and a half or so. And we saw a lot of the same look, like his central deck pool here. We saw him
could
play.
Also just run back the same deck. I don't actually think that would be a terrible idea either, now that you can't run into lava. I mean, if you run into Golem, you could struggle a little bit, but the the Mighty Miner at least helps that conversation. But you were saying the MK Hog deck could be a good pull?
Well, I mean, the MK Hog, I was saying that I think that there's a lot of stuff that he plays pretty consistently.
Okay, got it.
We just saw him play the Ram Rider deck, which is one of his main deck pool decks in this matchup already. We saw him play Drill NATO. So maybe going Hog Inferno Dragon. I think that the big danger here is that NATO and Snowball are both available. So if he does go into the minor controlled variation, I think that it's very likely that Ta plays something that can cover the real damage that minor control can do. So we'll see. Here we go. No more speculation. Let's watch.
Yeah. Everyone asking for the match to start. Remember, while we're doing all this speculation, they are also trying to figure out what to run. And like I was saying, maybe Venpers goes right back with it, but he goes to he goes even deeper. He goes to the split lane, looking like pressure coming in, although he doesn't have recruits. So he is going bait. Okay, all right. I still got a little bit.
Yeah, a little double bait action as opposed to more traditional log bait, but definitely going to stretch some of those spells thin here. And Venper's now just full sending. Everything. Goblin Barrel in. Wall Breakers in. One Wall Breaker connects, and this Barb going to get one shot here. So you get a good amount of damage. You end up behind 2.25 elixir, and you don't get a massive lead.
And is Ta running Royal Giant? Or is he running
Ram Rider?
Yeah, or is he running Ram? Because we'll have to see, because those two win conditions are very, very different in terms of those barbarians being a factor. And then how do you get on top of the Dark Goblin? And it is Ram Rider. But still, the barbarians plus those zappies, and now you don't have a big spell to get on top of the barbs and the zappies and the Dark Goblin and the barrel. So Venpers goes bait. Finally get a good call, and Ta on the other side of it, he's got some options, right? He's got decent responses, but I feel like it's going to be really hard to keep up with, and that Rascal Girl puts in some good damage on the left-hand side.
And he would have loved that Mother Witch to stay alive and get the princess, and now he has to spend some more on that princess, and Venpers knows it, so he just goes immediate wall breaker, gets the connection, and a little lag here from the system. We come back and all towers are gone.
Yeah. All right, cool. Fireball's out. Now we go Rascals in the back, and then we could just drop all of the Zappies on one side. You could drop the Dark Goblin on the other side, and the map control is so nice. I mean, excuse me, the gang in the Dark Goblin on the other side. And there you go,
And
Dark Goblin offset.
And this is... Ta needs to just abuse these Mother Witches because there is no way for Vempers to get them. The Mother Witches, there should be 3 Mother Witches. There should be a Coven on the board at some point. And you see right now a ton of damage in on that left-hand lane. Now recruits up. He needs to fireball this big pack here, otherwise it's going to take some wall breaker damage. And he takes 1.
And the Princess does not get the splash in, but stacking Princesses, and that's what Vempers needs to do. He needs to stack these Princesses so that they can help with the big pushes that come on the opposite side of the board, because that Fireball really has to pick and choose its targets. And honestly, the Princess is the one it's going to have to go to, so that means your Dark Goblin can get just a little bit more out of the defense on that left-hand side. So now another Princess needs to come down towards the center. And there it is.
Mother Witch trying to turn some raged up piggies into a problem, but they don't end up doing very much. Zappy's split 2 to the left, 1 to the right. And now let's see Vempers go one more time with the full double bait push. Goes to the outside. Mother Witch trying to... Oh, there you go. The fireball on defense. And Ta might finally be in the right rhythm, but is it too late because of the damage deficit?
Yeah, I mean, that Mother Witch getting 2 shots doesn't help anything, and now goes for the Princess at the bridge. Does get a shot on tower, and that's a huge shot. But remember, you cannot log your way out of this game. You're going to try to make something happen with Goblin Barrels, and those Goblins do nothing with the Bar Barrel coming in. Wallbreaker stopped. First Wallbreaker gets hit from the barrel. So just like you're saying, Rich, I think Ta is getting back in control, but is it too little, too late? This Ram Rider will tell us all.
Yeah, and interesting, going with just a pickup here. Fireball trying to make enough room for the Ram Rider to get through. Whew. And that's what you have to do if you're Vempers right now. You have to recognize that you're up and just not give the opportunity for those spells to get back in there. Oh, and they connect. And they connect. What a set by Vempers. Takes out Ta and stays alive through 5.
Vempers had a great recognition late game there with that Rascal Boy. He's defending with the Barbs, he's defending with the Rascal Girls, he's defending with the Goblin Gang. So what does Ta do every time? He just goes Mother Witch up high. You don't have a big spell, you don't have a way to get to it. That's exactly what you were talking about, Rich. So Vempers decides, I know exactly what you're going to do. You've been doing it before. Rascal Boy up front. And now Ta has committed too much elixir to the defense that has been working in the past because he cycles his recruits and then you just send in the barrel. And that was, I mean, a beautiful day by Vempers in terms of the way that he played after dropping Mohammed Light. Early on, you know, you go 0-2 against Momo, you have to sit back all day long and wait and see what's going to happen. And then you get yourself in, we'll call it closer to maybe like a 60-40. We'll see if it's actually, you know, that with the 7 and the 8 cards played, but really, really well done.
Yeah, I mean, very, very nice indeed. And, you know, you see this where the Bar Barrel couldn't completely control once you had the high-low pushes. The Fireball needed to do too much here, right? The Fireball needed to open up offensive lanes, control Princesses, and stop big, like, swarmy pushes towards that tower. And just not quite able to find all the targets it needed. Very nicely played by Vempers, very nicely picked, and he stays alive in our top 6 here. Kind of surprised to see Ta go out this early.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But that's the level of competition we have here. And speaking of competition, there's a little bit of Twitter action going on, Rich. I'm not sure if you see these conversations that's going on. It's been pretty entertaining. It looks like Anthony here and Jebas. Anthony may be the coach of Akaza, and Jebas is Jebas, and talking about the picks that Akaza came out with against Mo. That's a tough thing to do, is to get Jebas caught looking, and we'll see how that kind of flushes out tomorrow. But it's fun to see a little bit of that sportsmanship jabbing going back and forth.
Sure.
Let's take a look here at the bracket to remind you guys maybe just what we're talking about, and the fact that, wait, you're saying Mo lost to who? Well, Mo lost to Akaza right there. You see 2-1. Clown ends up taking the win there over Ruben. Ruben and Vempers will be the next match in our lower bracket. Inthrill and Vitor is the last match of the day. And remember, the winner of that gets thrown into a very tough spot going up against Mohammed Light in an elimination match. Inthril and Vitor in a best of 5, Rich. This is going to be really, really interesting because while I love both of these players, I've never really leaned on their deck picking or their decksmanship as the reason why I love them. So I'm very curious to see how they navigate through these first couple games, and if we do get to the 4 and 5, how they close things out.
Well, Vitor, part of that, part of the Kalalis team, so you do have the benefit of working with that whole squad, including Jebas. So as you mentioned him, definitely going to be a nice bit of a support there for Vitor in this one. Inthrill's gotten a lot better in the deck picking, right? And I don't know if Inthril works with anybody or if Inthrill's soloing it, but he's certainly gotten a whole lot better with the deck picking. We saw him put some people in some really tight positions as he made his run to the top 3 during our monthly finals back in September. So I like his chances here. And either way, one of them's going to have to go ahead and face Mo in their next elimination best of 5.
Yeah, and you know Mo in the lower bracket is not someone you want to run into. Very comfortable in that spot. And speaking about the lower bracket, we'll see who's more comfortable here between these two guys. I don't know if, Vitor expected to find himself where he was. And he had a very, interesting start to the day here. And now against a very tough opponent with his back against the wall. I'll say it again, just because he's at World Finals, I need Vitor to win this. Just like I was saying about Ruben at the top of the day, I need these guys to be just working farther and farther through the bracket. You don't have to worry about your decks being shown for World Finals now because we know that other cards are going to be added in. This is just about getting practice against the best, and a best of 5 is a really interesting way to do it, right? Because this is a format you never see, but technically it's a format that you should be able to navigate through very well if you're the better of the 2 players. You should be better with off-meta decks.
Yeah, and so I think kind of looking back at what they did in their last rounds, Vitor in his best of 3 against Clown, aka Kickash, he got the win with Lava Loon against RG in game number 1, and then I've got reverse swept running that Minor Wall Breakers recruits Mother Witch Skelly King deck, and then going into game 3, going more traditional with the Minor Wall Breakers bats, the one that's kind of taken the place of the Magic Archer deck. Inthril on the other side of things, in his game 2 against Ruben, went Goblin Giant Sparky went Goblin Giant for Goblin Giant and ran that weird Goblin Giant deck with the Rage and Arrows and the Night Witch version. Then went to Ram Rider, got the win there, and then went back to Goblin Giant Night Witch again. So if there's anything I want to see out of Inthril, it's not going Goblin Giant Night Witch in this matchup against Vitor.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unless he does it maybe in game 2 or something, and opening with the minions, Rich, is that part of that equation? No, it was not.
Yeah, he didn't play in that one. I mean, it could mean he's going to another different Goblin Giant deck.
Yeah.
But
Vitor opening with arrows. And this whole time that Vitor has not been on stream, he's been playing ladder. And he's been playing Hog EQ with Evo Knight, coming out with Loon here early on. Minions are out. Barbs are cycled. Let's see what I can get with my Loon. And now he sees that he's got an Inferno.
yeah, that's a fed Inferno here, and this Bomber is going to open up enough that Vitor has to respond. And chooses
maybe he's
not
just
to.
going to set up a lava. Yeah,
there you go. And then
I don't
goes
hate that
right
play.
into it.
I still want to see Vitor defend behind the lava. Nice. He gets the Inferno down. He's happy to take 1 shot. Now going to have to take 2 because of the snowball.
Oof.
And this is a very interesting push from Vitor. He needs to get a tower, or at least very close to a tower in this situation.
He does. I think he has his arrows again. There you
Yep.
go. So nice little clear here that will make the Inferno Dragon. And then split lane. I like that. He's going to go right into the Inferno, unfortunately. And I think that both players maybe not tracking their cycles as much as they would hope. And that's, oh boy, GG on the left-hand side. Towers down, and we're going to be going to a 2-tower game here, folks. And I don't know if Vitor has enough for the right-hand side here.
I think that's a really good call that you make about maybe not tracking cycle as well as they should be. A little surprised there on the right-hand side. Naked Loon from Vitor, knowing Inferno was back in, but still able to take the tower. So not the worst case is 2 lavas set up. And we'll see now with Inthril in a very substantial lead, about 1,200 HP.
Yeah, that Naked Loon into the Inferno, I mean, you're to be trying to suck out responses, but what it turned into was that push that Inthro put the loon behind,
Yep.
and got him a nice elixir or nice damage lead here. So, you know, I understand some of the idea here, but the overall result certainly can't be what you were looking for.
And Inthro goes balloon in the pocket to catch that tombstone. Snowball immediately on top of the Inferno and doesn't get the drop damage, but will get the death damage. Now down to 1130. And a pretty easy defense coming in for Inthrill.
And this is going to be a lot for Inthrill to contend with. You see him slowing down here. I don't know what his last... There we go. There's the arrows. Wow. Didn't have any knockback from all that. And
that Inferno, Rich.
Oh,
wow. Last second barbs.
Yes, but the Inferno, if Inthrill's distracted, Snowball has to come out here to hold off on that one. But look at the Skelly Drag just going to town on that right-hand tower.
Wow. And that evens things up. Basically, Inthrill looked like he was in a pretty decent spot to defend, but Vitor did a great job of just kind of shaking up the way he wanted to push his offensive troops in. And now that lava is just straight up on tower. Tombstone going to pull the balloon away, but this is still a healthy lava getting some good damage in.
That was a really nice little cheeky play there from Vitor to separate all of that. Now he has to try to do something with it, though. He's now spent his only real tool, which is the HP of his King Tower, and now he has to win pretty much here, or he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
And just going for the sellout. Those skeleton dragons have been timed perfectly by Vitor a couple times.
Oh,
Inferno gets on top of the tower, and so does the skeleton dragon. Those skeleton dragons from Vitor eating those minions alive twice was just too much for Inthrill to hold on with.
What a game from Vitor. What a way to stay in that one. Really could have been a disastrous moment, but high IQ knew he had enough HP to spend as a resource with that tombstone pull of the loon away from the lava play, and then did what he had to do. Sold out in that moment and finally took that tower. Really ice cold play from Vitor in this one.
Yeah, and I think that that whole issue of tracking cycle early on, Vitor was really able to get on top of it at the end. You saw him playing his barbs one card before his opponent every single time, especially that Inthrill was low on elixir. Those barbs in the pocket. Then you get Inthrill responding with his own barbs, tries to go up high, right? And then those skeleton dragons at the bridge. There's nothing else to play at that point. You're not going to drop a lava in front. You don't have enough elixir. You're not going to drop a balloon there either. So you have to play your minions. And those skeleton dragons do such a great job there from Vitor, doing exactly what you kind of said was missing early on, Rich. And once you figured out that cycle, or once he figured out that cycle, I should say, Inthrill was just in a world of hurt.
Arrows, Fireball, both out now for Vitor.
Excuse me.
And so now you think about Inthrill and Poison Delivery, the two best lava counters in terms of spells right now. I wonder if Inthrill goes there and kind of forces Vitor to see, like, hey, what choice are you going to make here? Are you going to try to stop lava again? In a BO5, I like repeating decks more than a BO3.
I do too, and I like that, or I like the idea of Inthrill not going to like Remy Ellie status just because arrows and Fireball are out and you don't have to worry about an attack from the skies. That feels a little too obvious. So maybe Inthrill instead opts to go for Graveyard.
Certainly has.
Could also be E-Giant.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating to see Drill kind of making this interesting comeback, and I wonder how much of it is because of all the tools you have against Royal recruits specifically.
And Bowler Golden Knight goes up against Bowler Regular Knight. And holding on that Golden Knight ability is Vitor, and now gets the dash. And I think Inthrill was just in a spot right there where he couldn't do anything about it. And also the Bowler's going to get 2 shots in here.
Huge shots. Huge shots indeed. Now, my suspicion here is that Vitor is not running the cannon cart here as well, just because we see the barb barrel. So should be running NATO and then either skeletons or gobs to round this out. There goes the stab gobs.
Yeah, and this should be was going to say, either a relatively easy defense or a really great NATO could come in, and that was perfect from Inthril. Gets the Firecracker, gets the Goblins. Barbarrel not going to do anything as it goes behind. Gets cleaned up by that Princess Tower. Now you don't have to worry about the offensive cycle of the Drill, and you're getting the double Elixir, so I'd love to see Inthril just set up with, like, Zappies in the back or something. Or Tombstone, that works too.
Well, this is the really hard part about Inthril having given up so much damage early on, right? Is that now Vitor is nowhere near as concerned about getting that first chunk of damage, and you can be comfortable with, hey, if I need to use the Drill to pull that E-Giant, I can. And that's a really nice luxury to have in E-Giant matchups.
I was just going to say that Evoed Firecracker was going to come down, and how to deal with that is going to be a really tough thing to crack for Inthril. And you saw him go the cheap route with the Barbarrel, but of course Vitor was ready to go with the Goblins, and now the NATO. Oh, wow. That's a interesting NATO. I think Inthril was trying to pull the Firecracker away? I think he just gave up, yeah. I was trying to legitimize that NATO somehow to give Inthril the benefit of the doubt, but clearly just knows he can't play through that matchup.
Yeah, there's no breaking through there. And he gave it his best a couple of times, but it wasn't going to happen. So 2 up, 2 down. Vitor now going to be handcuffed by having 16 cards unavailable. And we'll see if Inthril can pull off the reverse sweep. Has to do it one game at a time, though.
Yeah, what a unique deck, too, from Vitor. I mean, not unique in the sense of, like, the fact that... I mean, I guess not like that he created it, but just like that this deck is as good as it is right now in the meta. I mean, it's so heavy, and he didn't even have to use the NATO to get to tower. Yeah, that's a tough one for Inthril. But now Inthril, you know, like you said, Rich, he's got a lot of information in his hands at his disposal of things that are not available. You know, there's a lot of cards that are really frustrating that he doesn't have to deal with anymore, right? He doesn't have to deal with the Skeleton Dragons. The Evoed Barbs, they're not as much of an issue. We don't see them as often. He still has to deal with the Evoed Recruits is a part of the conversation for Inthril, but, you know, no Bowler, no NATO, no E-Drag, all these cards that kind of fare very, very well against the Recruits are not available. Firecracker could be a good call because Fireball and Arrows are out. So maybe just Evo Recruits Firecracker with like another baity aspect to it could be good. But I do think you go to Evo Recruits. They're the best card in the game. It's game number 3. You're about to be eliminated. You might as well play the best card.
And I think you're probably going to be up against Evo Recruits here. So that's an interesting question. Does you know, with Evo Recruits open, I don't like the idea of Inthril going to Lightning again with Evo Recruits open at this point, right? I mean, you are kind of coin flipping right now between Evo Recruits and Evo Knight, but I just do not like the idea of Lightning being in the deck here for game number 3. Let's see what Inthril has in store for us with his back against the wall.
And Recruits come out, no surprise by anyone in the world there. And Vitor looking like he could just be going straight up Minor Poison Control or Remy Ellie with walls.
And Recruits for Vitor as well. So like I said, no. Hopefully Inthril is not going into the Lightning direction.
Yeah, I feel like Lightning would have been a rough pull. He should have expected to run into the Recruits as well. And now you go Gob Giant.
Goblin Giant.
No building and cycle.
Yeah, Goblin Giant Recruits Skelly Drags Rage. And he pumps up here.
Wow. I mean, this is a situation where you should be able to paint your opponent into a corner. And right now, Inthril not doing that at all. Down 24-31. Pump not a relevant factor. Both have Evo Recruits. Vitor back around to Bomb Tower.
Well, I mean, here's the interesting thing about Pump, right? Is that Pump is going to require the Poison's focus unless he gets the Miner on it, which means that the Poison can't get involved in these bridge fights.
Yeah.
And so that I do wonder if we're going to see Inthril try to use that Pump to draw Poison's focus as time goes on.
I mean, I think it's a good idea, especially because at some point there might be a moment where Vitor opts to no longer go Poison route. Maybe he tries to go Miner and then it gets caught. Maybe Poison's out of cycle and then a Pump finally comes down because he drew it out by stacking you know, skeleton dragons right behind the 4 recruits, and there we
you
go.
go.
This time Vitor goes with the miner and now has to spend the poison, and now that conversation about the recruits plus the skeleton dragons gets to actually get thrown into the mix.
And there you go, sets up a 3-3 split. In reply, the same from Vitor, 34 seconds left in regulation time, and both players have dinked and dunked so far across this board, but no one has taken a commanding control of this game.
Love the mind games there from Vitor. Goes Minor Poison into the tower, gets the Goblin in response, and now all that elixir that Inthril could have used to maybe go on the offense gets wasted on defense and still takes tower damage. Does get 2 shots from that Skeleton Dragon, though. 22:58 now. It's 21:09. Things much closer for the beatdown player at the bottom of the screen.
And again, that's just the big question, is can Inthril get value out of these poisonable troops when poison's not there, and then when the poison does come there, he might have a chance for one more pump. I don't think he's going to, though. I think he's going to try to play this one out from here.
I would love to see him pump right now, though. I don't disagree with you, but I just really think that that's a good time to use it. Poison is now out. You still have over a minute and a half, but I think maybe Inthril's feeling the pressure, which makes sense. He's down 2-0.
And he just wants to try to get, and that's unfortunate for him. The Skeleton Dragon does not connect. 21:47, 21:09, the numbers on the right-hand side with just over 80 seconds left. And now he gets what will be the last pump of the game down, just asking for a response. And, oh, the miner goes all the way back into that corner and gets a ton chunked out of that elixir pump.
And that's basically the game. You needed the elixir advantage. You needed to preserve the pump. Now with 21:09 and 21:47 being the 2 towers, you've got the board controlled. If you're Vitor, you can get back around to poison. You can get 2 miners down. He just needs to defend here, and it shouldn't be that difficult.
My arrows here trying to open up a little bit more, stacking skeleton dragons in the middle, but the Evoed recruits escape in the left-hand lane, and those start to give the advantage. And you're getting the arrows, but you're not getting them on the tower at all with 35 seconds left.
Yep, and that's just a good job by Vitor where he's placing his troops. Now you just send in a miner at like 15 seconds remaining. Otherwise, you just defend and throw in a poison, and that's GG, well played. And I really like Vitor going with just straight-up control here.
And so Inthril has to ignore this miner and hope that he can break through in some significant fashion. But there's no way it's going to happen. That bomb tower will survive far too long, and that's going to be a clean 3-0 best-of-5 sweep by Vitor.
Yeah, and I love the decks he does it with, right? None of them are exactly what you expect him to come out with. The first deck, you go, all right, what's a strong deck that is currently in the meta that I'm not sacrificing a lot for? Let's just go Lava Barbs, right? I'm going to lose my Fireball, I'm going to lose my Skeleton Dragons and my arrows, but at the end of the day, if those all can come together and get a win with a Lava deck, I'm cool. Then he goes to game number 2. He doesn't even use his Tornado in the Bowler Golden Knight Firecracker deck. Bowler Golden Knight Firecracker, and you don't need to use your NATO to pick up a win. And this is what I'm talking about when I wanted to see an exceptional performance out of Vitor today, and then you get it. You go to game number 3, back up against the wall. He's played a perfect set, comes out with perfect control. I love the Phoenix being thrown in the mix just because it's a card that can't be ignored, but most likely you're not going to be able to spell it off the board. And Vitor just doing what he does.
Yeah, and Inthril going to Goblin Giant in this situation. I don't love it. He went to the well with Goblin Giant. He didn't go to the Goblin Giant Night Witch, but he went with Goblin Giant too much today, and got, I understand that it's overpowered right now, that it certainly is, one of the top 3 to 5 strongest cards in the game at the moment, especially from the win condition side. But you went to the well too many times, and it's not like it's unstoppable. It's not uncounterable, and Vitor able to overcome that and play a very, very nice game number 3, mistake-free Clash Royale, and keeps himself alive and in our top 6, hunting for that $5,000 grand prize.
Yeah, we saw Graveyard only like one time today, and I don't even know if Akaza even played it in that game when he beat Mo. But I just feel like with what I'm looking at with Inthril's deck here, you're just kind of hoping for your opponent to not do the things that they're going to do. they're going to run a big spell for your pump. You know,
Yeah.
maybe it's going to be one like Poison that isn't the best trade for them, but that's going to be there. They're going to have a building and they're going to have recruits. Those are
Sure.
like, I feel like the 3 things you can guarantee are going to happen when you get to game number 4 or game number 3 in this situation. And, you know, all those things I think Inthro was hedging against, and I don't really understand why, but props to Vitor for doing kind of what he had to do in a game and then still being able to pick up that win in game number 3.
Well, Vitor does pick up that 3-0 sweep win, but as soon as we have our bracket ready, we'll take a look at where he goes next because, yeah, phenomenal performance today in that best of 5. Dominating performance in best of 5, but now he's going to have a pretty tall order for him. He has made our top 6, though, which is a nice little jump up in prize pool and, of course, puts you just a couple wins away from getting towards that bigger money. But he does have a pretty difficult out for him coming up here and just coming up here tomorrow.
I was going to say, you know, everyone else in the tournament is rooting for Vitor now,
Yes.
right? In that lower bracket, get Mo out of there, work through, and then hopefully you have to deal with, you know, Vitor, Ruben, or Venpers, which is not a great selection to pick from, but you don't want Mohamed Light. So Akaza and Clown, they're going to sit back, wait and see who is going to come out of this little gauntlet at the bottom of your screen between Ruben, Venpers, Mo Light, and Vitor. Akaza and Clown still perfect on the day in terms of their sets. And when you look at who they took down along the way, very, very impressive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this was really, really fun stuff. And you talk about that elimination side of the bracket. Well, you have 3 world finalists who are also all Kalalis teammates on there as well. So,
Right.
It's going to be a very interesting little round robin that happens if, of course, Ruben is able to get past Venpers, who put together a really great best of 5 today. And then, of course, the upper half of our bracket, Clown and Akaza both feeling pretty darn good. Guaranteed spot in the top 3, $1,000 minimum. The question is who will stand in their way of that $5,000 grand prize. Andrew, we're reaching the end of our day. It's been a super fun one, but we are back here tomorrow for our finale.
That's right. Our huge finale, we're going to be giving away the majority of our $10,000 prize purse. And of course, remember to follow along with all things Royale Masters. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss when we go live. It'll be the exact same time. And big shout out to Akaza and apparently Golden Knight. Is he back? Question mark.
Golden
We'll
Knight?
find out tomorrow, man. But today he did some cool stuff.
If you haven't already yet, subscribe to the channel. Follow us if you're on Twitter. Turn on notifications. Make sure you're back here mañana. That's going to be 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Western Time, and sometime right in the middle of the day. I think that's 4 p.m. UTC, if I remember correctly, for our time here. So we'll be back tomorrow with the conclusion of the Royale Masters Classic Edition. For Andrew Guy, I'm Rich Slayton. On behalf of everybody here at the production, it's been great having you here. Oh, by the way, your EU, if you're in the European Union, your clocks are changing tomorrow, so double check that time. Just, you know what? Turn notifications so you don't miss stuff. Just make sure you come back here. And, of course, we will have a little, you'll be able to find us in-game as well. That's it for today. As always, be excellent to each other. Party on, dude. See you tomorrow.